I've met young kids out there, and I don't think they've even seen the Bond movies. They've heard of the Bond movies, but they connect straight to the game because that's where their head is at. They're in the game world. And they play all the games that are out there, and the Bond ones have always been the most successful.
Something tells me Pierce never played 007 Racing, did he? Everything or Nothing, in a lot of ways, felt like something of a culmination of the EA Games tenure with the James Bond license to that point. The company had released a variety of Bond games coming from different developers, all having their strengths and weaknesses, but from Agent Under Fire and Nightfire especially, it felt like EA Games were inching closer and closer to giving gamers an experience that truly felt like they were playing through an original cinematic Bond adventure. And with Everything or Nothing, that certainly begins with the superstar cast they assembled for this thing. In previous Bond games, maybe John Cleese would show up in a voiceover to explain your gadgets to you, but there was no real precedent for the cinematic voice actors reprising their roles for the games. So Everything or Nothing felt quite revolutionary at that time for including John Cleese's Q, Judi Dench's M, and most importantly, then current James Bond Pierce Brosnan, in both likeness and voice, something that had never happened for a 007 video game before. And after the last few games opted to go first person with their presentations, Everything or Nothing was absolutely going to make the most out of that expensive Brosnan likeness by opting to go third person, in order to really sell the feeling that players were living the journey vicariously through a legitimate James Bond. Everything or Nothing was absolutely more than a movie tie-in game, mainly because it had no James Bond movie to tie into at that point, so it set out to tell an original 007 story. It assembled a high-profile cast for key roles, and it was going to hit all the beats of the Bond movie cocktail that audiences would expect. The game opens with a THX logo, for goodness sake. If anything should tell you that the developers are going for a cinematic presentation, it's that. Back in the day, I didn't even know games could come with such a high-profile sound production. Even the title, Everything or Nothing, is a deliberate reference to Eon Productions, the company that were in charge of the James Bond films at that time. Eon, of course, expanding out to Everything or Nothing, though that might depend on which of the producers you ask.
Cubby was always, when I said to him, does it mean everything or nothing? He'd say, never heard of that.
Cubby and Harry formed a company called Eon, Everything or Nothing.
I'm a little confused.
Well, we wouldn't want that, would we?
Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. By the time Everything or Nothing released in early 2004, I was still at something of a peak of my formative James Bond obsession. I was 14 years old at that time, Die Another Day was the latest movie, and I loved that thing so much, I was watching that DVD over and over and over again. So when Everything or Nothing came out on February 27th, 2004, I was well, I wasn't there on the day of its release, obviously. I was 14 years old at the time. I had school on the Friday. I went to my local game store on the Saturday to buy the game. I wasn't about to go and pull a sickie from school just so that I could play a James Bond game on its release date. God damn it, I should have really pulled that sickie. And if you're wondering exactly how I remembered that date specifically after all these years, well, that's because I kept my original receipt from my Saturday morning trip to the shopping centre to pick up a copy of this game, and made use of a £3 discount voucher for it too, so go 14-year-old me for frugality. Back in the day, I played Everything or Nothing a lot. I loved it, and yet over the years, I can't say I've quite racked up as many hours on it as I have the likes of GoldenEye, Agent Under Fire, or Nightfire. It was also not a game that I 100%ed back in the day, so I'm coming into this video knowing that there are things to experience with the game that I have never done previously. I'm determined for this review to be as detailed as it can possibly be, so we will be covering every single player level on a variety of difficulty settings, every reward, every cheat, every performance, every story beat, even the co-op mode and horrifically disappointing arena mode will get covered in this video, so buckle up, Bond fans.
A platinum idea.
Before we dive into talking about Everything or Nothing, if you love James Bond, please do consider subscribing to this channel by clicking the subscribe button below. Every new subscriber helps this channel grow and improves its reach, and I love being here celebrating everything to do with James Bond. So if you are able to subscribe today, it would be very much appreciated. So with that out of the way, stick your disc in your console and grab your Primus strategy guide, because we are deep diving into James Bond 007, Everything or Nothing. If you're loading up the game for the first time, much like Nightfire before it, rather than take players to a main menu, Everything or Nothing throws you right into a pre-credits style mini-mission to kick things off. There is of course the signature gun barrel sequence too, which does a great job at recreating the look of the sequence from the Pierce Brosnan films, though I will always have a soft spot for the Ministry of Silly Walks version from the GBA version of Everything or Nothing. The white iris of the gun barrel fades into a shining full moon, and we begin the game in the Pamir Mountains of Tajikistan, as the voice of Judi Dench's M sets the scene.
007. Intelligence reports that a nuclear suitcase bomb, stolen from the ex-Soviet stockpile, has surfaced in southern Tajikistan. Unfortunately, it's about to change hands. The wrong hands. We cannot allow this to occur. Recover the bomb and bring it back.
Prevent a villain from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and this is the first level of the game. I can't wait to see how the stakes escalate from here. I love this little setup with these two dudes who you just get like instant villain from. That guy in the pinstripe suit in particular, he looks like he does all of his shopping at 1930s Mobsters R Us. His red-headed assistant in the green skin-tight suit is awesome too. Absolutely no reason to be here, but it's a Bond game and it's going to be at least 5 minutes before the players get a glimpse at another beautiful woman, so we need to make sure we can get one in early. Gotta love the gratuitous ass shot too. Did Michael Bay direct this cutscene? Seriously though, I hope she used an appropriate amount of talcum powder before zipping into that thing, because the way that has molded around and into her ass crack is next level form-fitting. But enough about ass cracks, because get ready to hear Pierce Brosnan's first original lines as James Bond in a video game.
Well, what have we here?
It's confirmed, 007. That's the device. A Soviet PU-239 with 12 kiloton yield. You are authorized to use all means necessary to retrieve that case.
Understood.
So, you guys gonna do this exchange, or just stand here nodding at each other for a while longer? Bond blows up an assortment of nearby explosives, which immediately causes the two factions to start firing on each other. All those trust-building nods were for nothing then, eh? Bond takes cover and then it's into the level itself. Being the very first level of the game, it of course acts as a bit of a tutorial, starting players off with the most significant mechanic of the game, covering and shooting. As Bond, players can take cover behind walls and such to shield from enemy fire, then lock onto targets and pop out from behind the wall to take them down. It's a nice conceit too that rather than having all enemies locked in on Bond from the very start, they're fighting it out amongst themselves. It gives a first-time player some precious moments to get to grips with these early controls without it becoming an onslaught, while also keeping up the action-packed feel. Eventually, a helpful jet will blow a hole in a nearby wall, which releases Bond into the main courtyard to grab the nuclear device, which prompts your next instruction from M.
Find a rocket launcher.
I absolutely need that as my ringtone, just Judi Dench saying find a rocket launcher on a loop. Turns out M's foresight is not to be questioned, as the rocket launch comes in handy for fending off jets, tanks, artillery. This is such an explosive first level, and I really do adore how the game just throws you into it. You're taking out enemies that in other scenarios would be entire boss battles all to themselves. It's really cool to start things off on such an explosive front. An enemy jet in its death spiral blows a hole in one of the walls which allows Bond to escape, but not before the jet rears itself one final time in a kamikaze attempt at killing Bond. Love the idea that the pilot prioritized using the last gasps of workability from that plane to launch it directly at Bond, rather than just, I don't know, maybe set the thing down gently to escape, but whatever, it gives us our big finale explosion before Bond is whisked away by his evac. Ground Zero is a wonderful opening level to the game that really does hold up on repeated plays too. It's just fun, all-out action, but story-wise I have to admit I'm a little disappointed that those two nefarious guys completely disappear. You see the big helicopter take off at the start of the level, so I guess that's the 1930s mobster and his severely wedgied assistant making their getaway, given that they came in on the thing too, but I don't know about the other guy. I guess he just dies in the crossfire, but it just seems odd to me that you set up these three unique villains and they never appear again. Anyway, all of that is quite quickly forgotten as the cutscene transitions into a full-blown title sequence complete with original song Everything or Nothing by singer Maya. The preceding EA James Bond video game Nightfire also had a title sequence with original song prior to getting to the main menu, and I loved that in its own way too, but Everything or Nothing has a level of polish to it that makes it my favorite title sequence and song pairing of any Bond video game. It's such a banger of a track, and we'll be hearing 3 different versions of it throughout the game. There's this main title version, and then there's a jazzy number and a techno remix, great for requesting at club nights. This song is definitely more in the vein of a Die Another Day by Madonna. It's very pop, it's a little R&B, it's not a bombastic Goldfinger or License to Kill, and that feels fitting given where Bond was at this point in time, and hey, it's a video game, it feels right to have something a little bit more contemporary and upbeat. And the sequence it accompanies also just perfectly captures the vibe of the James Bond movie title sequences of that time. I love the muted color scheme, you see the platinum tanks, the Soviet imagery using actual footage from Pierce Brosnan's movie gun barrel sequence for this moment is really cool. Though I do feel sorry for this invisible woman fighting to escape this red velvet though. Don't you just hate it when you're hanging your bedding out to dry and then the wind picks up? Title sequence over and it's time to see your mission score based on Bond moments, enemies subdued, weapon accuracy, weapon efficiency, and mission duration. Bond moments operate under the same principle as Bond moves, from Agent Under Fire and Nightfire. Occasions during levels where performing a certain action, things the game deems to be specifically Bond-esque, prompt a 007 logo to appear on screen and you get extra points. Ground Zero contains 2 such moments, one for rappelling out of the upper level to get get to the ground rather than using the stairs, and another for taking out repelling guards before they reach the ground. Pretty simple stuff for this first level. In an appreciated quality of life update on the previous game's mechanics, Everything or Nothing features clues as to how to achieve Bond moments. On the score pages at the end of levels, you can click through and see some faded stills for moments you haven't achieved, and occasional hints are provided on the pause menu too. In the previous games, if you didn't have a guide to tell you what to do, you were just kinda trial and erroring it until you figured out what triggers them in most cases, but here you can probably figure it out based on the in-game hints available. The game's scoring system works on a bronze, gold, and platinum ranking. Not quite sure why silver didn't make the cut, maybe because it just looked too similar to platinum? There are a whole lot of unlockables in this game to talk about, which I'll get to in a little while, but basically gold medals unlock concept art, some alternative character models, weapon upgrades, and even a couple of levels, whereas platinum unlocks cheats that you can access via some button input codes. In the case of both gold and platinum awards, things are unlocked in the same sequence, so unlike the previous two games where, in Nightfire for example, if you wanted to unlock the Odd Job multiplayer skin in particular, you would need a gold on the exchange level specifically. In Everything or Nothing, you're accumulating golds and platinums, and no matter which level order you collect them in, your first gold medal, for example, will unlock the same production stills collection, regardless of whether you get that gold on the first level or the last level. How platinum awards are attained is also its own unique thing compared to the previous EA games. Rather than achieving a certain score, the game requires you to first achieve a gold and then complete the level on 00 Agent difficulty, the hardest of the 3 difficulty settings. And only once you've done that can you play it again on 00 Agent difficulty, but this time with a specific challenge, which you aren't even aware of until you start the level and hit pause. So in Ground Zero, for example, the platinum challenge is to complete the level by taking 500 damage or less, and this is helpfully indicated by an in-progress tab on the top right of the screen. How you do in terms of the other scoring criteria doesn't matter when you're going for the platinum challenge, which is cool, and I'll be going through these things level by level, but in a lot of cases I really felt that the platinum challenges gave me an extra excuse to play through a level with an entirely different strategy to what I'd done previously. So I think the system actually works really well and encourages mixing things up on replays in most instances. Ground Zero being the first level of the game, it makes sense that it would be one of the easier platinum challenges, and so long as you're taking cover when needed and dispatching of enemies quickly, you should have no problem finishing the level with less than 500 damage taken. I mean, an explosion went off in my face, and it only added a meager sum to the total, so I can imagine that most players unlocked the first platinum award cheat of the Golden Gun. But as I say, I'm gonna get into talking about each of the cheats specifically later in the video. For the meantime though, let's crack on with the story and into the next level, MI6 training? Wait, you mean even after the previous level, I need more tutorial, more learning?
Well, I won't keep you for more than an hour or so if you give me your undivided attention.
Well, yes, actually, because there's a lot going on gameplay-wise in Everything or Nothing when compared with previous Bond games especially. Starting with hand-to-hand combat. 2 different buttons are designated for punching either left or right. A 2-button combo allows you to throw enemies, and a different combination allows you to counterattack. This might not seem like a lot, but the extent of hand-to-hand combat in a lot of previous Bond games was punching as a last resort when you ran out of bullets, and so Everything or Nothing was definitely presenting a more detailed hand-to-hand combat style than what Bond game fans might have been used to. Next up is another key feature of the game, rappelling up and down walls, another mechanic I'll talk about a lot more throughout the video. There's a more thorough shooting tutorial than what we had in Ground Zero. While locking onto an enemy, you can adjust exactly where you're going to shoot them by moving around this little red dot, allowing you to target specific parts of bad guys for headshots or for parts of them that are peeking around cover, but another targeting system is present in the game in the form of Bond Sense. When triggered, things enter this kind of slow motion space, and Bond is able to target inanimate objects as well as gain information on enemies and interactable things, which is pretty cool and something else we'll be talking about a lot more throughout the video. The rest of the mode is mainly combat focused, so I'll take the opportunity to talk about how crazy it is that Bond is experiencing this training through some kind of gigantic wireframe VR holodeck. It's certainly stretching the old Cubby Broccoli adage.
We're not science fiction, we're in fact science fact.
Canonically speaking, I guess, sure, Die Another Day featured a VR training program, albeit a startlingly realistic one in comparison to Everything or Nothing. So does this make the game slightly more or less science fact than Die Another Day? Yeah, the science factometer is saying that we are slightly ahead of Die Another Day at the moment. We'll have to keep an eye on this as we progress through the game. Small thing, but I love this bit where you rappel up another wall and it prompts you to turn around so that you can just see this pit of gigantic spikes beneath you. Like, what the hell, Q? Why why on earth would you program such a thing into this?
Just trying to enjoy myself.
The level concludes with a tutorial of the Q Spider, one of my very favorite gadgets to ever appear in a Bond game. It's this little mechanical thing that you control through vents and into hard-to-reach places and explode in order to open doors and such, just like here in the tutorial, and that's the end of the training. There's actually going to be a damn sight more to come in terms of the game's mechanics that aren't included in the training. This thing is absolutely packed with all different kinds of gadgets that we'll get to in turn, but this tutorial just kinda gives you the basics up front, which is maybe merciful because I can't begin to imagine how long this training would be if it covered absolutely everything in the game right off the top.
And thusly we enter hour 9 of your training, 007. Observe this piece of radioactive lint.
So onto the first fully fledged level of the story, A Long Way Down, which of course begins with a briefing from M and Q.
Good day, 007. 24 hours ago, Oxford scientist Katya Nadanova was kidnapped while demonstrating top-secret nano-robot technology. Microscopic machine prototypes whose technology must not fall into the wrong hands.
We provided you with a new vehicle for this mission, 007, the Porsche Cayenne Turbo, perfect for the rough terrain you'll be traversing. Standard armaments include forward-mounted machine guns and heat-seeking missiles. We're also equipping you with our newest rappel technology, designed to allow you to walk up and down walls freely. It attaches to most ledges and should prove useful on your next mission. Good luck, 007.
We've tracked Dr. Nadanova to this facility. You are to secure the Doctor and destroy the nanobot prototypes. Good luck, 007.
Now, for me, when it comes to James Bond games, there are some levels that are just absolutely synonymous with their titles. The levels that as soon as you hear the game's title, you picture that level. Someone says GoldenEye, I think Facility. Nightfire, The Exchange. 007 Racing, Forklifts. And if I think of Everything or Nothing, A Long Way Down is absolutely the first level that springs to mind. It's a rappel-heavy level for a start, and that feature was so front and center of the game's marketing. Literally, it's on the front cover of the box, and the developers clearly want to show it off in the most spectacular way possible. And yeah, it's an amazing feature. It's so satisfying just leaping off ledges throughout the level, dropping down, how the perspective shifts to accentuate the distance is really awesome. The fact that you can shoot bad guys while you're rappelling. The level gives you a variety of route options depending on which sides of the building you want to go down, encouraging replay, which is cool. The fact the building is also exploding as you descend adds to the epicness of it. Even though it does beg the question, wouldn't Bond have been better off setting the timer for slightly more than just 7 seconds? It might have been easier to escape the building had everyone in it not been alerted to your presence by the massive explosions going on. Or maybe this is Brosnan Bond character development, like after GoldenEye he learned a valuable lesson to always set timers for slightly less than what they would ideally be. In terms of mission objectives, things are pretty simple. In the first main area you come across, you need to drop a bomb down a vent, which unlocks the rest of the level, where you basically just need to get down to the bottom of the building to escape. There's a section where flame vents are activated, and you need to go and turn them off in order to continue your descent, but that's about it objective-wise. There are, however, plenty of goons to shoot, and as I say, multiple available routes mean that you can diversify your gameplay on repeated visits, which is really awesome. There are also a variety of attainable Bond moments in this level. The first one, I'm ashamed to say, I only discovered as a result of attempting to 100% this game for the first time ever for the purposes of this video. In the very first area you rappel down to, if you turn left and look up, there's a nearby ledge that you can rappel up and find a small area with a sniper rifle. It's a cool little hidden weapon. I kinda wish it were a rocket launcher, or something a bit more useful for this level in particular, as I can't say it's a very sniper-friendly environment, given how close quarters and fast-paced it all is. But we will be talking about this area again when we get into talking about the co-op mode, where the presence of a sniper here actually comes in handy, so maybe this was just left in here in the single player as a little nod to that, but we'll get there when we get there. The next Bond moment you're likely to come across is achieved by activating this steam vent, which paralyzes enemies that are in close proximity, allowing you to take them down with ease. After that, you can rappel down to this burned out room where you can gain a third Bond move by flipping over this table and using it for cover against 2 rappelling goons. Oh sure, when Bond flips over furniture, he's rewarded. When I do it, I'm told, please leave, sir. We're sorry we don't have any foo yuck on the menu, but for the last time, it doesn't exist. A further Bond move is achieved by making use of more steam vents to immobilize enemies, and the level's last one is another that I had never experienced until making this video. In the bigger burned out area, you can use Bond sense attempts to find weak points in the ceiling as a result of the building being in the state of disrepair that it is, and if you shoot at one of those points when an enemy is underneath, it takes them out and triggers a Bond move. All of these work as teachable moments for the player to bear in mind moving forward, whether that be to always investigate every nook and cranny of a level for secret areas, or keeping an eye out for traps to activate, or how interacting with elements of the environment can provide cover, or just generally neater ways of taking out multiple enemies. These are not elements covered in the game's tutorial, but things that the players are allowed to discover and learn themselves, and it's always extra rewarding when games take that tact. In order to earn a platinum medal, the challenge is to finish the level in 3 minutes 30 seconds or less, which I think would be a breeze for most players, especially considering you've already played through the level on 00 Agent difficulty in order to unlock the platinum challenge. It's probably advisable to skip some of the Bond moves and bad guys in favor of just kind of powering through, but even then I found myself plenty of time to spare by the end of it, so I can imagine that this is another platinum medal that even novice players would be able to achieve with some ease. What a stunning opening level to the game's main story though, from that first epic cutscene of Bond running away from the explosion and rappelling off the top of the building. It is so much damn fun. My only wish is that it were twice as long, because I love this environment. There's a great assortment of enemies to take down. It's a wonderful showcase of so many of the game's new to Bond mechanics. What a superb experience. The level comes to a close with a pre-rendered cutscene where Bond spies Dr. Nadanova being bustled onto an armored train by the general guy from the pre-credits level, funnily enough, and catching up to said mode of transport is going to be the main objective of the next mission of the game, Train Chase. Driving levels had become a staple of the EA James Bond games by this point, and Everything or Nothing features some of the very best we've ever had. The cutscene at the start of the level draws players towards a cloaked Porsche Cayenne Turbo, which is going to be your main mode of transport for the level, assuming you can get into the blasted thing. Oh wait, yeah, left side. This is a high-speed chaseable level that sees you tearing through the exploding facility, including this incredible moment where the dam bursts and sweeps away a whole bridge, and then you're zipping through the desert and some ancient ruins, making most of the Cayenne's missiles and machine guns, taking care of baddies while maintaining speed in an attempt to catch the armored train. Now, we'll get to Bond's faithful Aston Martin Vanquish later on, which was a bit of a Brosnan Bond staple at this point, but I really love for a few levels you actually get behind the wheel of the Porsche Cayenne. It's not a vehicle that Bond ever drove in any of the films, and Porsche in general has never really been a car brand especially associated with Bond to my knowledge, unlike Aston Martin of course, as well as BMW, who had a big presence in the Brosnan films of course. Hell, even Lotus has more of a Bond association than Porsche, and yet for whatever corporate tie-in, promotional, marketing-minded decision-making went into this process, I love it. Giving Bond a vehicle that is totally unique to this video game rather than recycling older ones that we'd seen in the movies absolutely helps contribute to Everything or Nothing's own singular visual identity within the James Bond space. With the notable exception of the DB5, of course, Bond rarely gets behind the wheel of the same car over multiple films, and while I do love that the Aston Martin Vanquish from Die Another Day is going to be making a reappearance later on in this game, I'm kind of glad that it's not the only car that you get to drive throughout this adventure, and so bringing in a vehicle that is totally unique to the series for this game is another move that I think helps Everything or Nothing stand out as, certainly to this point in time, the most cinematic James Bond game to ever be. The final part of the level has you up on the tracks facing off against the train's weaponry in your attempt to get close enough to it before it reaches a bridge. I love this level to bits, but the very end of it has always felt a bit clunky to me. Like, you take care of the guns and missile launchers, and then you're just kind of tailgating the thing, waiting for it to reach a certain point before the end of the level triggers, the Porsche goes flying off, and then there's a pre-rendered cutscene of Bond making it onto the train from beneath, and that signals the end of the level. It's just the pause, like, after the level has been so bombastic, high energy, and it ends with, like, well, okay, I guess I'll wait around a little bit. It's a small thing, but I do just think the timing could have maybe been improved on it. But how can I complain when there's actually a whole other alternative way to play through this level? This is so cool and so not signposted in-game, which makes it all the more awesome. But if you turn right rather than left at the very start of the level, instead of finding a cloaked Cayenne, you'll find a materialized motorcycle, which you can hop on and play through the level taking a completely different route. This is awesome. them and offers a completely different way to experience the map. The motorcycle is faster but also more fragile, and it can be difficult to control in certain places. But the fact it offers players a totally different experience for the level is just phenomenal. Weaponry-wise, you just have missiles. There's no machine guns on this particular motorcycle, but on this level, I don't think it matters too much. The whole thing is a pretty speedy affair, but especially so when played on the motorcycle. There are 3 really epic Bond moves to achieve in this level. The first is by taking down this helicopter, which prompts an awesome little cutscene moment. Now, most of the time when I played this thing through, Bond does that classic action movie thing of not even looking at the exploding thing right next to him. But in one of my plays, I recorded this where Bond actually looks at the helicopter, and I thought it was pretty funny, like the man just admiring his own handiwork for a moment. The second Bond move actually depends on whether you're in the car or on the bike. So the missiles from the train are blowing up these, I'm sure, rather ancient ruins. And if you're in the Cayenne, just driving up the ramp and over the exploding pillars, Bond move accomplished. Though interestingly, the exact same action with the bike does not prompt the Bond move. Rather, if you're on the bike, you can slide underneath one of the fallen pillars and achieve the Bond move that way. I love that they went to the effort of implementing this relatively small detail, but one that lets you know they were putting thought into this, and opting to play through the level with either the car or the bike is not the exact same experience. There are elements unique to either choice, and I think that's brilliant. The final Bond move is a pretty simple one. There's a ramp that gets you up onto the train tracks sooner than if you were to just continue around following the road. But it's the same outcome whether you're in the car or on the bike. Platinum challenge on this level is another time-sensitive one. This time you need to complete the level in 2 minutes 14 seconds, and I highly recommend the motorcycle for this. Hell, it was the only way I was able to actually complete the task. I thought it was interesting to note too that the timer doesn't pause for in-game cutscenes. It just keeps on ticking, which if anything is an incentive to not partake in Bond moves. Even if it means you're missing out on the epic sight of Pierce Brosnan on a motorbike flying through the air away from an exploding helicopter, because damn it, that bit of badassery just cost me precious seconds on the clock.
Doesn't time fly?
Next level is titled An Old Friend, and the reason for that title will become very apparent by the end. But first off, Bond must work his way through the train in order to try and find the captured Dr. Nadanova. It's worth noting here that on some levels, whether you opt to play through on either Operative or one of the harder difficulty settings will affect the objectives you're expected to complete in order to finish the level. The distinction between Operative, Agent, and 00 Agent is that Operative is core objectives only with less challenging enemies. Agent is standard mission objectives, and 00 Agent is standard mission objectives with more challenging and occasionally even extra enemies. In An Old Friend, this manifests itself as, with Operative, you just need to get from point A to point B of the train. For Agent and above, you have the extra objective of having to destroy 6 missile launch computers, which makes sense of this very elaborate prop in one of the train cars, this gigantic rocket launcher. Just as an aside, I love the visual touch of the floating particles above the missiles. It's such a cool little detail that makes complete sense because, hey, we are here in the desert. I guess this is just supposed to be like sand getting whipped up or something, but I've always felt it was just this really nice little aesthetic feature that obviously not something they had to do, but something that really does just add to the authenticity of the world they're building with this game. Sometimes I stop myself when I'm making these videos and I think, am I going deep enough on this? And then I edit something like that where I'm talking about dust particles and I'm reassured, like, yeah, I think that's deep enough. Anyway, I like that there's the distinction of objectives between the difficulty settings. It means that the Operative experience is often the most linear, the most quick way to play a level and get the lay of the land before the extra objectives you get in Agent come in, and they can often give you a different perspective on the environments and can offer very different ways to actually play them through. It's not always the case, but I'll be calling out some of the more significant differences as we go. In An Old Friend, the extra objective of destroying the missile launch computers doesn't add too much overall. It basically just means you need to target and destroy 6 computer screens, all of which you can do in the train car in which you start the level. I do find it odd though, you just need to destroy 6 of them and the objective is completed, but it can be any 6 of the 7 that are present in the car, so it's weird that there's 1 left over. But what do I know about missile launch control computers? I'm sure this is 100% authentic. Well, it checks out on the science factometer, so could be Broccoli's happy, that's the main thing. This is a great level to showcase the game's stealth mechanics. Goons are not not aware of Bond's presence, so stealth takedowns are a good option to not alert the rest of the train, but going in all guns blazing is certainly a viable way to complete the level too. The level's Bond moments are actually entirely centered around maintaining stealth. There are 4 on offer, and each one is granted for making it through each of the first 4 train cars by using stealthy methods, mainly chokeholds in my case, to take down your enemies. This goes out the window by the time you get to the 5th car, where you're suddenly plunged into darkness and getting shot at, and it becomes very necessary to activate thermovision, and my god, finally, an EA-published Bond game got the whole heat vision thing right. Agent Under Fire and Nightfire both made an attempt at a similar feature, which in my experience just ended up being completely useless, to the point that when the thermovision activated actually made it harder to see what was going on. So the fact that Everything or Nothing got this mechanic right, and that there are genuinely going to be points in the game when you need to use it, make it a very worthwhile inclusion. It only took them 3 games to get the thing right. Making it to the final train car prompts a cutscene, which reveals the return of a somewhat notable villain from Bond's past.
I don't suppose we could just talk about this. I guess not.
Bringing back Jaws using Richard Keel's likeness for the character as he was back in the 1970s is such a stroke of genius move. I absolutely adore it. But what does this mean for the character's supposed happy ending from his last cinematic appearance in Moonraker, where he turns into a good guy and gets to go off with his blonde, pigtailed, non-braces-wearing soulmate? But you know what? I'm actually totally fine with fudging any sense of continuity to bring the guy back. Like, yeah, sure, let's headcanon this. I can believe that he and Dolly got married, had kids, and with the extra mouths to feed, I guess it's hard to be employed as anything other than a villain's henchman when you have gigantic steel teeth that you're refusing to get removed. So I guess it was back to the henchman hotline agency for Jaws, and lucky for him, an ex-KGB agent with a penchant for platinum came a-calling, and it was time to start biting people by the neck again for a living. The really phenomenal thing about resurrecting Jaws for the main storyline of a Bond game like this is that it's obviously something that they could only achieve in video game form. To have Jaws as he was from those previous 2 late 1970s movies here in the early 2000s looking exactly the same, doing battle with the current Bond of the day, it's a concept that the films couldn't have achieved at the time, without some probably incredibly dodgy CGI work at least, and to 14-year-old me at the time of the game's release, this was somewhat of a revolutionary concept. Though I want to specify, for a game, I am not suggesting that I would be this enthusiastic about them resurrecting an actor in a younger form for one of the films. It would be difficult to suspend disbelief for a live-action film, but as I say, for a game like this, and especially when the actor is alive and can consent themselves to their likeness being used, I think it's really cool. It's cool that Richard Keel gets his name in the main credits too, along with the rest of the voice cast, and there are several places online that cite him as the character's voice actor for the game, which, if so, was the easiest voice work in the history of gaming, I think, considering the character's vocals amount to a handful of grunts. Though, you know, I don't think I've ever seen a photo or video of him in the recording booth for this game like I have every other member of the main cast. So it wouldn't surprise me terribly if maybe the grunts we hear did come from someone else and the actor's credit was solely for likeness rather than voice. But then I love Richard Keel, so you know what, I hope he did get paid handsomely to turn up to a studio for a few minutes and go grrr into a microphone. Anyway, here he is for the boss battle to end the level. He stomps around ripping up these mechanical columns and lobbing them at you, and you need to punch him back into the exposed electricity in order to defeat him. If you're playing on Operative, then it's 1 zap and he's down, where Agent requires 2 zaps, and 00 Agent 3 before his health fully depletes. Obviously, you have to dodge his attacks, but I do love the animation for if he catches Bond and then proceeds to take a bite out of him. There's no blood, obviously, this isn't about to go gory with Jaws, but even just how he wipes his mouth and then he does this little, like, neck stretch thing, I think they absolutely nail Jaws in the game. He looks perfect. We'll be talking about further appearances when we get there throughout the rest of the game, but defeating him here ends the level. On to the Platinum Award, which is achieved by completing the level on 00 Agent difficulty without taking any damage, which for an all-guns blazing guy like myself read like some kind of a death sentence. Obviously, in order to achieve this, you need to max out on stealth tactics, and earlier on when I said that I had a new appreciation for some of the game's mechanics as a result of doing these Platinum challenges, I genuinely started loving taking the stealth approach with this game. I think this might be the most most fun I've ever had with stealth in a Bond game, and the game's takedown mechanics work wonderfully. I will say the most challenging aspect of this specific task was the final card just before you reach Jaws. I had to give that a fair few attempts, and the system is pretty brutal in that if you fail, you do need to replay the level from the start. Though I was playing this on an emulator for the purposes of capturing HD gameplay footage, so I get to be a heathen and use my own save states. Though I must say, I was quite worried I was going to spend hours upon hours facing off against Jaws without taking any damage, less so from him, but more from like bits of debris or a spark of the electricity or something. But when you get to him, the in-progress bar disappears, and you actually can take damage during the Jaws battle and still achieve platinum. This is going to crop up a few times when it comes to these platinum awards, but there are levels where the challenges only apply to a certain section of them, but the game doesn't tell you this. So initially when I got to Jaws and the in-progress thing disappeared, I was like, did I catch a stray bullet from an unseen enemy as the game faded to the loading screen? But no, mercifully the trial just ends before you reach the boss battle. Into the next level, which begins with a cutscene of Bond rescuing Dr. Katya Nadanova, played by Heidi Klum.
Dr. Nadanova!
Who are you?
Wow, they both took that incredibly close-quarters gunshot in their stride. Lucky for Katya, Bond has an impeccably steady hand, even on a moving train. The general from the pre-credits level makes it away on a helicopter with the nanobots. As a parting gift, he blows up a nearby bridge, meaning that Katya and Bond must pursue in a helicopter themselves as the train crashes into the river below. It's here that we get the classic Bond line from Brosnan.
Can you fly this, Mr.
Bond. James.
And with that, it's off into a somewhat unique level for the EA Games Bond lineage, where you're piloting a helicopter and pursuing the General through these canyons and ancient Egyptian ruins. You can utilize missiles and bombs to take out a number of enemies throughout, and this is going to be the only flying vehicle level of the game, and damn it do I wish there were more, because this is so much damn fun. Definitely one of my very favorite levels of the game, and a suitably bombastic climax to this whole Egypt set assortment of levels. I love how much of the environment itself is destroyed and blown up throughout this thing, especially the ancient ruins. Like, you just kind of want to cut away to a bunch of stunned archaeologists witnessing the collapse of thousands of years worth of history. The helicopter itself controls really well, and as I say, weapons-wise, you got missiles and bombs. The latter really only come in handy for taking out some of the warships dotted throughout the level, which are also just as easy to take out with missiles, but hey, it's nice to have the option. In terms of defense, you can use flares as a way of dodging enemy fire, definitely needed for 00 agent difficulty. Flares operate on your battery gauge, so you can't completely spam them, you have to wait for that to recharge slightly, but honestly I never had a problem or felt like I'd been left with my trousers down while waiting for it to fill up. Bond moves are earned by, first of all, destroying this bridge filled with enemies towards the start of the level, then you get another one for destroying all 3 enemy boats, and the very last one for avoiding the flamethrower booby trap when you're flying through the temple towards the end of the level. Seriously, how were those ancient Egyptians able to install flamethrowers in the walls of their temple? Well, with the assistance of the aliens that helped them build it, obviously. By the way, there's this really cool altar room that you get to at the end of that pursuit through the temple, and I've always really loved it, but a difference I noticed between the PlayStation 2 and GameCube versions is that in the PS2 version, you can see the room pretty well illuminated from entry, but in the GameCube version, the room is completely in darkness until the General blasts a hole in the wall and light from the outside comes flooding in. For the purposes of this playthrough, I'm emulating the PS2 version, but the GameCube version is the one that I had as a kid. It's the version that I'm most familiar with. And in that version of the game, I always enjoyed that moment. I loved that you were in this very dark space, and then all of a sudden there was just a blast of light, and it turns out you were in this like super impressive room full of like gold and hieroglyphs. It's a dramatic visual moment on the GameCube version that is sadly missing from the PlayStation 2 version, but whatever, small thing I noticed. The level climaxes with a boss battle of sorts as the General reaches his base.
We're not science fiction, we're in fact science.
Fucking hell! My science factometer! It's exploded! What in the leftover Star Wars prequel game asset is this? I'm an easier lay than most when it comes to bending the rules of reality for James Bond, but this is insane. The structure looking like it came courtesy of extraterrestrials is one thing, but an energy force field is just beyond the pale. Maybe it's for the best that the Bond series had a gritty, down-to-earth reboot coming with the next film in the series. If it had continued along this path, then logically, the next Bond villain would have had to have been an alien.
Good evening, Mr. Bond, or as we say on our planet,
Okay, world-breaking designs aside, this is, nevertheless, a very fun boss battle. You need to destroy each of the 3 force field pillars, I can't believe I'm saying this sentence in relation to a James Bond project, to remove the shield and then blast the General's helicopter to death to destroy the core of the structure. This level's Platinum Award requires you to destroy the base in less than 45 seconds, which is not especially difficult and makes you think that all the money spent on building this thing was probably misspent when it can be taken down in a matter of seconds, but maybe if he'd invested all that cash in a faster helicopter, he'd have gotten away with it too. But no, the General is sent to a watery grave, and at this point you do have to ask the question, who the f*** is this General anyway? We are 6 levels into this game, and if there has been a main villain of the story so far, it is the General. He's in the pre-titles, he's at the facility you're destroying in A Long Way Down, he kidnaps Katia, he's the boss of this level, which climaxes Act 1 of the game's story. We don't even get a full name from him. He's barely even glimpsed in a handful of cutscenes, to the point that I don't even know if most people would make the connection back to the guy that we see in the pre-titles level. His voice acting isn't even consistent.
Of course.
He's still behind us. Get to the base.
From a story perspective, it seems a bit sloppy to have this recurring figure that is supposed to be the primary antagonist of the story so far as we the players are aware, and yet you blink and you miss him. It's a shame he's not a more memorable presence. And hey, you know what? Bond has such a long history of generals in the movies, and they brought back Jaws. Why not bring back a general? Any general from the past? That could have been a fun reveal. Who's that general? It's Koskov!
I told you to finish me. I told you!
Sandstorm ends with a cutscene that serves to introduce us to our real main villain, though, as Bond drops Katia off and she meets with Nikolai Diavolo.
How can I ever repay you?
Allow me to take you to dinner. Next time you're in London.
I'd like that. But until then... take that as a small down payment.
I look forward to collecting the rest.
Good morning, darling. I deduced the mission was successful.
All of the nanobots were destroyed, except for one. My gift to you, courtesy of MI6 and James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
You know him?
He killed Max Oren. My mentor, my teacher, my friend.
I didn't know. I'm sorry.
How ironic. Bond has now planted the seeds for his own destruction. Soon enough, the world will know and fear the name Nikolai Diavolo.
You'll have everything you desire.
Yes, Katia. Everything. Or nothing.
You said it, you said the title. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Willem Dafoe is the single greatest example of casting specifically for a James Bond video game that we have ever had. The guy, back then and even today, could well be a main Bond villain in one of the movies, never mind in one of the video games. And at the time of the game's release, I don't think I fully appreciated this at all. I knew him as the villain from the Spider-Man movie, of course, but over the years I've seen him in a lot of projects and really have grown to love the guy as an actor. If I'm watching a film and I see his name in the credits, I'm always keen to see what he's going to bring to the table, and I think acquiring him for this game is a massive coup. His presence brings a great deal of gravitas to the story, and I'd go so far as to say that he is a key ingredient in what makes Everything or Nothing feel like it's elevated above a lot of other Bond games in terms of having that cinematic quality about it. With Everything or Nothing, it truly feels like you are playing through the 5th Pierce Brosnan Bond adventure that you would have gone to see on the big screen. Next up is an MI6 interlude. There are going to be a few of these throughout the game. They're selectable as if they're actual levels, but they are rather extended cutscenes where Bond returns to the MI6 headquarters, which is based in Scotland in this game for some reason. This is obviously based on the location used in The World Is Not Enough, but MI6 had only relocated there because the London building had been attacked, and in Dine of the Day, everyone's back in it, so I don't know why Everything or Nothing chose the Scottish headquarters. Maybe M just likes to holiday there and she'll take any excuse to transfer for a bit. And speaking of M, Judi Dench reprises the role and gives Bond his briefing.
007, welcome back.
Nice to see you again, M.
Excellent work rescuing Dr. Nadanova, 007. However, we have a new crisis on our hands. We've lost contact with 003. He was in Peru investigating Nikolai Diavolo, a KGB agent so ruthless that the KGB itself tried to have him terminated. Unfortunately, they failed. Diavolo's control, his teacher, was Max Zorin.
Yes, we once played bridge together. He lost.
We believe 003's life may be in danger.
I'm on my way to Peru.
What a fabulous coincidence that Bond is being sent on a mission involving Nikolai Diavolo, when at this point in the story, he has no knowledge about the connection to the nanobots and Katia. By the way, the whole Diavolo history back to Max Zorin, the main villain from A View to a Kill, is nothing short of a stroke of genius to my mind, and a wonderful additional bit of connective tissue with cinematic Bond. It's a small thing, really, mentioned a couple of times throughout the gameplay, but I think it's really cool in that it gives Diavolo an immediate reason to absolutely hate Bond. And in terms of the wider Bond universe as well, it's just really cool to see them drawing from the film lineage in this way. It's another thing that really does help Everything or Nothing feel like it is embedded in that timeline. Before heading to Peru, it's off to Q Branch to meet with John Cleese as Q and his new assistant, Miss Nagai, played by Masaki Aito, who is clearly here because the developers don't trust the 13-year-old boys playing this game to pay attention to a crusty old man unless he's next to a sexy woman with an exposed navel. Isn't it just awful when you buy a shirt and you get home and you only then realize it's missing some buttons? I hope she kept the receipt. Anyway, on with the demonstration.
This is your remote control spider cam. You can use it to scout ahead.
A spy disguised as a spider? Frightening.
Yeah, you know, I'm familiar with the Q Spider. Do you not remember you talked me through it in the training level? Then you also talked about it again at the end of Sandstorm when you gave me a rundown on a bunch of gadgets. Yeah, there's a strange bit of overlap regarding gadget exposition. When you end certain levels right after the score info, you will occasionally receive briefings from Q regarding new gadgets and upgrades and stuff.
The Spider Explorer, our new field reconnaissance device. You're the first agent to use it, so do be careful, 007.
Which is all well and good. Finish Sandstorm and you get the updates about the Q Spider, strobe grenade, sleeper darts, but all of those are the subject of this next cutscene briefing. Don't know why they felt the need to double up on this, unless they just genuinely didn't have enough faith in a restless player to give any of this any attention at all, so they figured they'd just keep on repeating themselves, so something would sink in at least. But it does mean there are parts of this game that can feel very talky, and I feel like some judicious trimming might have helped. Says the guy with the 3-hour video talking about this game. It's all more work for John Cleese though, so I bet he's laughing with any luck he was paid per word. That being said, the briefing is fun to watch. Bond has some quips, there's some random Q Branch stuff going on in the background, all good. We also get a peek at Bond's Triumph Daytona 600, promising more motorbike action in the levels to come, and presumably fulfilling some kind of sponsorship deal. I'm not sure the 13-year-olds that were probably the core demographic for this thing were necessarily the best group to be targeting with product placement like this, but it definitely did something. I'm not a motorbike guy, I can barely name any of them, and yet I know the Triumph Daytona 600, so I guess maybe that's a successful example of product tie-in. You got the guy that doesn't know anything about motorbikes remembering the name of the damn thing. Briefing done, it's off to Peru for the next act of the game's story, where Bond is tasked with meeting up with 003's last known contact in the area, geologist Serena Saint-Germain. Wait, geologist? Wow, the A View to a Kill callbacks are coming thick and fast in this one. The level begins, and I love how quickly action kicks off.
003's last known contact in Peru was geologist Serena Saint-Germain. She may have an idea of his whereabouts. Check in at 003's safe house for a clue to her location.
It's Bond!
How the hell could you tell it's Bond? I mean, I guess he's back in his Porsche, so did Diavolo circulate his license plate around his goons so that everyone knew who they were looking out for? Patrol dispatched, it's time to head to 003's hideout, which has one hell of a hidden entrance. I hope this thing doesn't automatically activate for any old passerby. Rush hour traffic would be a nightmare if so. Inside the house, Bond receives a call from Serena, who mistakes our hero for 003.
Yes?
Jack? Thank God. It's Serena. I was so worried. Meet me. I'm at the Hotel Americano.
Right.
And watch out for the local police. They're not who they seem to be.
Is anyone?
I've always really liked that line, is anyone? It's not a joke line or anything, but it just feels like Bond having a nice little self-reflective moment. I'm glad it's here. So it's off to meet with Serena, which gives you a good excuse to utilize the Porsche's cloaking feature in order to avoid enemy patrols. The idea of an invisible vehicle was of course a big feature of Die Another Day, and I guess since then Q saw fit to install a cloaking device on every vehicle they put out. And say what you will about where an invisible car fits on the science factometer, you can't deny it's a great mechanic for a video game. game. My only complaint is that I wish the battery lasted just a tiny bit longer. I get that it's there because there has to be limitations on the thing, otherwise it would completely break the game. But there were times I ended up feeling more frustrated with the feature than anything else. I don't think it leaves much room for error or exploration. You basically just need to use the cloak for whatever that one specific goal is, and then that's it. And in this case, that goal is to get to a shady spot in order to deploy your RC car to cause a commotion at the local firework distillery. Ah, fireworks in a Bond game. You know who'd really love this? Agent Under Fire Bond.
Fireworks.
Love this little RC car, by the way. It gets a couple of moments to shine in the game, and it's such a zippy little thing. I don't know if, aesthetically, it screams, like, world of James Bond, but similar to the Q-Spider, I think the gadgets in this game have a lot of personality. If they ever released this as a real-world remote-control toy version, I'd buy 12. Setting off the fireworks earns you a Bond moment, as well as provides a distraction for a rather fickle bunch of guards, I must say. They literally drive right by you, whereas before, if they got so much as a whiff of the Porsche's engine, they'd be coming down on you like a ton of bricks. Now they pay you no mind at all.
S81ANR5, isn't that the guy we've been told to watch out for? Shut up, can't you see there's fireworks, for God's sake?
Guards distracted, it's time to head to the Hotel Americano to meet with Serena, played by Shannon Elizabeth, who I unironically say is another example of genius casting for this game. Shannon Elizabeth may not be a terribly well-known name these days. I think the peak of her fame was probably in the early 2000s, thanks to the likes of Scary Movie, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, 13 Ghosts, and a brief role in Love Actually, in which she and Denise Richards play sisters. I wonder if the subject of Bond ever came up while they were on set together. Now, I do want to be clear, this is not necessarily the resume of an actress that they would have gotten to play the main Bond girl in one of the films at this point in time, especially following on from the likes of Halle Berry, Sophie Marceau, Michelle Yeoh, but for a video game, let's face it, teenage boys are going to be the core demographic. And to be perfectly blunt about it, casting the young lady that got her boobs out and masturbated on Jim's bed in American Pie is the most perfect bit of casting they could possibly have done for that demographic. I don't suspect American Pie holds much cultural cachet with the youths these days, but the first and second of those films came out in 1999 and 2001. Me and my friends were tweens, and when the VHS for 2 in particular came out, I still remember going over to one of my mates' houses, and we all gathered around to watch what was the most adult movie imaginable to us at that time. But in the first one specifically, there's a very famous scene where Shannon Elizabeth gets pretty nude, and I think every boy around my age at that point in time knew that scene. So getting the sexiest woman in the world to a 13-year-old front and center of a James Bond video game was brilliant. I hope she got paid handsomely, and whichever casting person thought of her for the role got a raise. Because yeah, this couldn't be more perfect casting at that point in time for the target demographic this game is going for. Anyway, Serena tells Bond 003 went off to a place outside of town to investigate platinum, Serena apparently discovered, so the pair head over. Stealth is no longer a requirement, so you can blast your way through enemies if you see fit, but you can also opt to use the cloaking device some more, and doing so, you can probably get past most of these enemies without having to engage in combat. You achieve the level's second Bond moment by veering off-road for a little shortcut through the side streets of this village, ruining some poor shopkeeper's business by destroying their entire stock of pots and ceramics. It's not a requirement to destroy their livelihood, of course, but definitely the Bondian way to go about it. Upon approach to your final destination, a tank appears and causes a roadblock by decimating a nearby pillar. God, this game really does have it in for ancient architecture, doesn't it? So going off-road is the only option available, which cues a bit of a clunky little cutscene that draws attention to the Cayenne's ridiculous suspension. Like, my god, that thing bounces about 25 feet in the air and can just continue? Never mind the cloaking device, the suspension on this thing is what Q should have been touting as his great achievement. Or maybe that should be the traction, because this is some serious incline this car is having to deal with. Tanks are blocking the entrance to your destination, so time to veer off-road once again and park up nearby, bringing the level to a close. The Platinum Award for this level is achieved by completing another timed challenge. This time, you need to make it from the point where you pick up Serena to the fortress location in less than 1 minute and 55 seconds, which basically requires you to perform a flawless drive and generally avoid combat, as enemy attraction is likely to be one of the main things to potentially slow you down. I actually found this to be quite a difficult one. I had to have a few goes at it, and when I did make it, it was like within the final second I could have potentially completed it on. Like, the timer literally went to zeros across the board, but I still got my award, so thank you, Everything or Nothing. Not sure I deserve this, but okay.
Seems you've passed, by the skin of your teeth.
Next level is Vertigo, where Bond must get over his crippling fear of heights in order to chase Kim Novak up a tower where... oh, no, wait, sorry, no, different thing. Rather, Vertigo is the start of a handful of levels that involve finding 003. The location is really cool. You're in this kind of fortress/mine kind of thing, and you're basically on the ascent looking for clues as to the whereabouts of your fellow 00. It's a level that makes use of a variety of the mechanics you've learned, so right off the bat you can opt to go in stealthily or actiony, though the level's first Bond moment is awarded specifically for taking the stealth approach and taking down the guards in the first area you come across without kicking up a fuss. The level's second Bond moment makes use of the thermovision gadget. Bond drops down into this dark area that's full of bats, so I guess we should expect to see Christopher Lee pop up at any moment. Getting to the end of the tunnel, picking up the rocket launcher secures the Bond moment, and it's another gadget that helps you get the third moment on offer too. Activate the Q-Spider, get it into this otherwise boarded off area, and complete a little maze of scaffolding and vents in order to reach an otherwise inaccessible stash of weapons and armor. Interesting to note a couple of things here, that the Q-Spider can actually pick up body armor for you. We'll forego thinking too hard on the logistics of how that transports from where the Q-Spider is over to Bond, especially because the other thing is traumatic, so if a bad guy sees the spider and it gets a bit too close, it can be crushed to death. My beloved Q-Spider, no! We will avenge your memory, my baby, I promise! The level's final Bond moment is achieved by destroying the jamming tower in suitably bombastic fashion by Bond sense aiming at some fuel barrels resting just beneath, and exploding those will result in the entire structure collapsing, which is totally awesome. Not a Bond moment, but there is an interesting moment where... so there's a goon firing rockets at you, and you can push this minecart along the tracks. So you'd think that this is the game telling you, okay, you need to crouch behind that thing to avoid the rocket fire, and then approach the goon and kill him that way. But weirdly enough, if you don't do that and just take him out from afar, you get this little cutscene. It's such a strange little thing. It feels like it should be a Bond moment if it's going to prompt something like that, but no, it's just a little visually dramatic flourish, I guess. It's the thing that pops up in other places on other levels too. I don't know why. It's only for some long-range kills and not others, but do let me know in the comments below if you have any intel on this one. Objective-wise, you're having to collect 003's uplink device and get that installed before backtracking on yourself to end the level by taking the lift up to the top of the fortress. I really do love this level. It stands as one of my favorite of the whole game, and it's a really wonderful balance of so many of the different mechanics available to you. It provides a good deal of epic moments, a good number of goons to take down, and most importantly, Brosnan looks terrific in his tan suit. Just what you want to be wearing when you're infiltrating a villain's base in the morning and attending a garden party in the afternoon. Platinum on this level is achieved by completing the whole mission in under 4 minutes. This is basically a case of just blasting through as quickly as you can. Say goodbye to stealth, say goodbye to Bond moment detours, you just need to leg it, basically, and hope that you don't get too overwhelmed by guards at any point, but it's a pretty straightforward challenge overall. You know, I think I'm getting the hang of this whole platinum challenge thing. It was something that I always found quite daunting when I was a kid playing this game, which is the reason why I never 100%'d the thing. But so far, most of these have been, you know, quite doable, dare I say. I'm feeling a bit confident, unless, of course, there's got to be a ridiculous difficulty spike on the next level that's got to make me regret saying all this, but we'll see. The Ruined Tower sees Bond continuing on his mission to find 003. This is a fairly objective light level. The only thing you really need to do is gain access to the inside of the ruins, which you do by conveniently finding a minecart full of dynamite, sending that along a little track, and then shooting it to explode an opening in the doorway you need to get through to finish the level. But this is very much an environment to be explored, and there's a good deal of combat throughout, which makes up for it being a little light on story and objectives. It's not like there's a whole lot of different routes to take or anything like that, but much like the previous level, it's just a really well-crafted, rather linear action experience for the most part. There are 4 Bond moments to attain. The first 2 are a little odd, in all honesty. When you start the level, you're in a room with 2 guards, and taking them out without either of them noticing gets you the first moment. Judging from the clue they give you, and also from my Prima guide saying use stealth attacks, I'm guessing the game wants you to take them down silently, but I tend to find you can just blow them both up in the same explosion and you get the Bond moment anyway. It's a similar thing for 2 more guards patrolling outside. When you start the level, taking them both down without the other noticing gets you the second moment. This is when the sleeper dart gun comes in handy. It's a bit of a broken gadget, in all honesty. It essentially acts as a one-shot kill weapon, though obviously the conceit is you're putting the guards to sleep rather than killing them. They never wake up, though, and it only takes 1 shot to fully take down an enemy with this thing, making it arguably one of the most powerful weapons in your arsenal. So that's the sleeper dart, surprisingly joining the golden gun in the one-shot Hall of Fame. When I say I find these 2 Bond moments odd, it's because they rely on stealth, but then guards are activated and start coming at you in their droves right after this anyway. So it feels a bit odd to me to encourage stealth when everyone is just going to be automatically alerted to you immediately anyway. But whatever, it gives you an excuse to use the sniper that you can find after rappelling up this ledge, ledge again towards the start of the level, and doing so gets you the third Bond moment available. The final Bond moment is a little more hidden. You have to use your Q spider to run along this narrow ledge and follow a path around that will eventually lead you to some body armor. Just to speak on the Q spider more broadly, I think it's such a great feature for encouraging players to really take their time and soak in the environments a little more. And look out for things like a tiny opening here or a narrow ledge there that may lead to a Bond moment or armor or a weapon stockpile. It adds an extra layer of richness to these environments, which is a really lovely thing. So onto the Platinum Challenge, and what do we have? Another timer? Another damage-related one? Let's see. Fire 10 rounds or less, eh? Well, how hard can that be? Without a doubt, the damned hardest platinum tasks in this game are the ones where you have a limited number of rounds you can fire. And don't think you're getting around this by using gadgets instead of weapons, because even the bastard sleeper darts count towards the total. And if that wasn't cruel enough, they say 10 rounds or less. Well, you need a round in order to blow up the dynamite at the end, so that only leaves you with 9 usable rounds in this level. It essentially means that every shot you fire has to be a guaranteed kill. There is no room for idle bullet spraying here. And in a big, rather open environment like this, where it's easy to be swarmed and enemies are carrying automatic weapons, and on 00 Agent there are multiple enemies with rocket launchers to contend with, this was a very difficult one to achieve. And yet, I actually kind of appreciate these ammo-specific challenges in a way, because it gave me an excuse to play things a little differently. Obviously, where possible, I was having to engage in hand-to-hand combat, and I actually came away with a whole new appreciation for the mechanic. And it's cool that you get to see different animations when Bond punches a certain way or performs a certain takedown. And it's not like I wasn't using hand-to-hand combat previously, but to be almost completely reliant on it is a different thing, and it made me pay more attention to the power mode mechanic as well. This is when, in hand-to-hand combat, if you dispatch of multiple enemies, a blue-rimmed Bond will appear on screen, and for the duration that it's there, Bond's hand-to-hand combat is powered up, and he takes less damage from enemies. It only lasts for short bursts, and in situations like this on Ruined Tower, it comes in handy, though I wish that it had a bit of a bigger impact on the gameplay overall. It just feels to me like if you call something power mode, it should make more of an impression, as opposed to being something that I actually forget about until it pops up on screen and I'm like, oh right, yeah, I guess that's a thing. Anyway, on to the next level, Death of an Agent, which bodes well for 003's future, doesn't it? And sure enough, the level opens with a cutscene that fulfills the promise of its title.
You've come on a fool's errand, 003. Sometimes I think MI6 assigns your numbers based on your IQ. A friend of yours?
You'll have to do better than that! It's bulletproof!
Enjoy a slow but inevitable death, 003.
Do I have to do all the dirty work? Get him!
So, first objective is to reach 003 before he dies, or maybe before I die, because what the hell is this? Why am I starting on such low health? Yeah, something that I find a bit annoying, when you're playing the levels through in sequence, if it's a moments later kind of situation, then you start the level with the health you had at the end of the previous one. So, because I was running on fumes completing that Platinum Challenge in the Ruined Tower, now I have to start Death of an Agent with that same depleted health bar. I guess it makes the experience more immersive when it's this continuous, like, yeah, this is picking up seconds after the end of the previous level, so it makes sense that your health wouldn't have replenished in that time, but it does also just feel a little bit unfair to me. It's slightly annoying to not be starting every level off on an equal footing. Fortunately, in this level's case, it's not too long until you reach some body armor, and the Q-Spider comes in handy to take care of a bulk of the bad guys right from the off, activating the little fella and taking some ramps up to a higher level allows you to get the drop on some goons, and doing so also earns you a Bond moment. 007 reaches 003 in time to hear his last words.
James, you must get to New Orleans. Stop Diablo before he...
I do really wish this moment focused on Bond's face a little more. I love the expression they give him here, this badass scowl, clearly pissed off at the death of his rather toffee-accented colleague, I must say. But his face is at the very top of the frame. I wish the camera panned up a little, or maybe we could have just cut away or even had a line from Bond. I don't know, a fellow 00 dying in the field feels like it should be a bigger deal in this moment. And just story-wise, I think you'd ideally want to clear a beat of that to acknowledge Bond processing this, but we kind of just carry on business as usual, really. Now the objective is to find another way off the cliff. What, really? It took 2 whole levels just to get up here, and now it's all about getting down again? This is a cool environment, though. I love how it's kind of this ancient structure that's all mossy and stone, and yet it has since been retrofitted into a mine, and there are these power cables running through the thing and rail tracks, but nature is still reclaiming elements of the structure. I just think it's a really nicely designed environment. The experience of playing this through on Operative, or one of the higher difficulty settings, is significant too. On Operative, it's fairly short. You just blast your way through a bunch of bad guys, make it onto the rail tracks, open up the door, kill a bunch more bad guys, and off you go. On Agent and 00 Agent, that route is blocked, so you need to instead take the scenic route through some pitch black catacombs. Thermovision gets some good use here, of course, and there are plenty of goons to shoot, but damn is this area disorienting. It's a bit of a maze, and even with the map available in my trusty Prima guide, I had some difficulty getting me bearings. Where the f am I going? Stagger around for long enough though, and you'll eventually find a rocket launcher, and picking it up gets you a Bond move, so there's that. After some further staggering, you'll eventually ascend a staircase into the minecart area again, where you can flick the switch to open your way through to the next area. During this firefight with these guards, if you can take out at least 3 with this propane explosion, you secure your 3rd Bond move of the level. I know 3 seems very specific, but that's what my Prima guide says, so who am I to argue with the Oracle itself? Heading through the doorway takes you to the 2nd part of the level, which ends up being something that is another wholly unique element of the game. But first, a cutscene which reveals to Bond that Katya is a baddie in league with Diavolo.
I think she's fallen for you, James.
Pause and rewind. We're going to be talking about one of the most thrilling bits of this game, one of the true highlights of the whole experience, but I have me some story quibbles. When Bond and Katya last parted ways, Bond was none the wiser to her duplicitousness, something that I would have thought Diavolo would have been keen to play to his advantage rather than have her do something as crass as lob a Bond girl out of a helicopter. But okay, fine. Of his endless employ of henchmen, she's the only one to do this particular job. Yeah, sorry Katya, goon number 486 is on his cigarette break. You'll have to don your platinum catsuit and do the dirty work for us, okay? But the fact that Bond's reaction to this reveal is just squinting and pursing his lips a bit, it's not the greatest of reactions, is it? And look, I'm not saying I need a full-on the world is not enough treatment with exaggerated Gork, Waller, close-up and music score punctuation. But he's realizing here that someone he thought was innocent and an ally is actually a villain's accomplice, so I think something a bit bigger than this would have been warranted. Maybe he doesn't realize he's actually met Katya before. It does read more as the kind of expression someone pulls when they think they've met someone but can't quite place where. It's me, James, Katya. We literally met last week. But whatever, because Katya drops Serena down the side of the cliff, and Bond, in a no hesitations whatsoever move, leaps after her, and you have to catch up to Serena while shooting bad guys and evading obstacles. This is incredible, so exhilarating, and the developers clearly knew it would be a player favorite moment, as you can select to just play this section of the level from the main menu. It's such a James Bond thing to do as well. Like I said, there's just no hesitation at all. It's almost like this is an entirely instinctive decision on his part to just jump to almost certain doom and figure out what the way out of this thing is going to be later. This section isn't even like a minute long, but they managed to pack in 3 Bond moments. The first you get by using your Bond sense to target these crates of dynamite to take out a bad guy. The second you get by squeezing between this rocky ledge and the wooden walkway, and the third is immediately after that, again, using your Bond sense to take aim at some explosives to kill a guard. But those 2 moments are so close together that there isn't even room for the 007 logo to appear at the top of the screen for both of them before the level ends.
Nice to catch up with you again.
Serena seems to be taking the trauma of what just happened in her stride, so much so that Bond decides she'll be fit for driving a tank as the cutscene brings the level to an end.
You'll drive.
What? I don't...
You can learn on the way.
It's a post-GoldenEye game, so of course we've got to fit a tank in here somewhere. The Platinum Challenge on this level is definitely one of the trickier ones. You have to take 100 points of damage or less on the first section of the level only. Now, for the most part, this isn't too difficult until you get to the catacombs. And then everything goes to hell. My strategy ended up being just to, like, stay put for a while and let the bad guys come to me before cautiously venturing into the next area, because all it can take is a small number of bullets of enemy fire, and then that's it. Challenge failed.
It's a cruel business. It's
always been a cruel business.
Next up is A Show of Force. It's an on-rails shooting level for the most part, and sadly it's the only on-rails shooter in this whole game, and these kinds of levels had become a bit of a staple of the EA Games tenure of Bond. Both Agent Under Fire and Nightfire had 3 such segments apiece, and I'll be honest, given the sheer volume of levels in Everything or Nothing, I'm surprised that this is the only such one here. But hey, it's a great one, so it has that going for it. Serena's driving the tank back through the village that you came by earlier. As Bond, you have access to a Gatling gun and the rockets, of course, and there are enemies galore to keep you occupied for the journey. Some really bombastic moments in this too, like when the town square fountain is destroyed and then you can explode a whole petrol station, demolish this rather lovely looking arch. A Show of Force acts as something of an explosive climax to this initial Peru-based chapter, which can only come as a relief to the inhabitants of this place. Like, what a day for them to have to suddenly deal with all this destruction. I have to give a special shout out to the ceramics shop owner who, in the time it took Bond to get up and down that cliffside fortress, was able to restock their shelves, only for Bond to come tearing back through it again anyway. In this initial on-rails segment, there are 3 Bond moments to attain, one from just blasting through the gate at the very start of the level, another for exploding the barrel to take out these guards next to the ceramics shop, and the third by using a single shot to blow up the gas pumps at this garage, which then serves to take out the enemies assembled around it. Anyway, Serena and Bond eventually reach the now late 003's hideout.
I want you to stay here and stay out of sight.
Are you coming back?
I'll be in touch.
Not quite sure I buy the sudden romance between these two, but sure, I guess the shared trauma of losing 003 has had some kind of aphrodisiac effect. Time to head over to meet Q at the extraction point, so on you hop, the Triumph Daytona 600. Actually, wait a minute, how the hell did this thing get here? Did Q personally deliver it because he knew that Bond would be needing it? If so, damn it, I would have loved to have seen that cutscene of John Cleese's Q riding this thing here. This is a really short, but pretty cool segment where you have to make it back to the runway and then onto Q's departing plane before the timer runs out. Despite the length, there are still 2 Bond moments packed in here, one for taking an off-road shortcut through the otherwise winding dirt track, and another for making use of this conveniently placed ramp just as you enter the airfield. To achieve platinum on this level, you need to reach the plane in less than 45 seconds, and given that the less than 60 seconds you already have to contend with on 00 Agent difficulty is challenge enough, never mind you need to shave off 5 seconds for just running to and mounting the Daytona. This was another case of just trial and error, and ultimately I succeeded, but very much with like no seconds at all to spare. I have a feeling this is going to be a fairly typical thing for my timer challenges, isn't it?
Seems you've passed, by the skin of your teeth.
It's back to Scotland next for another MI6 interlude, though this one is entirely focused on Q Branch, and the briefing from M as to what the hell your mission even is appears in the opening cutscene for the next level. Anyway, the big development of this particular interlude is that Bond now has a stealth suit. I guess it makes sense as a logical progression from a cloaked car, like, sure, a cloaked suit. I don't quite know how it also affects things like skin, hair, and eyes, but okay. I would ask Cubby Broccoli where this fits on the science factometer scale, but I haven't seen him in a little while. I'm starting to get a bit worried. More in line with reality, just, is that the Q Spider has now been upgraded to include an explosive feature.
I suspect I won't be bringing this one back to Q Lab.
Built to be expendable, 007. I only wish you didn't treat everything I gave you like that.
Well, I can be careful when I want to, Q.
Isn't there something official you should be doing, 007?
It's back down to the garage next for an update on the Aston Martin Vanquish, but just before that, I appreciate there are reasons beyond my comprehension for why this is the way it is, but in both this and the previous interlude, there are these awkward, like, bridging cutscenes, where Bond and Q step out of a lift together, and I've always found it quite clunky how you go from cutscene to loading screen to pre-rendered cutscene to loading screen and back to cutscene. Like, was there no other way to make this whole transition at least a little bit smoother? Anyway, Bond is reunited with his beloved Vanish, KEO2, from Dine of the Day and Nightfire, of course, making the vehicle one of Bond's most well-utilized across the films and games, which is all good by me, as it's genuinely one of my favorite Bond vehicles ever. As I said earlier on, I love that Bond gets to drive the Porsche throughout various parts of the game and the uniqueness that that brings to Everything or Nothing, but at the same time, I do quite like that we still have the best of both worlds, frankly, and we get to see him behind the wheel of one of his more recognizable and iconic vehicle brands. And so it's back across the Atlantic for Bond as he follows up on the tip-off from 003 and heads to New Orleans. Love the Roger Moore-era locations we're revisiting for this game, by the way. New Orleans from Live and Let Die, Egypt from The Spy Who Loved Me, keeping my fingers crossed for a bit of outer space later on. Mardi Gras mayhem begins with a briefing from M.
Bond, M here. MI6 confirms the identity of Arkady Yayakov, a fugitive war criminal sought by Interpol. Intelligence links Yayakov to Nikolai Diavolo.
Ah, yes. Max Soren's student.
Yes, and we believe he might be involved with the missing nanotechnology.
Taking a graduate course in it, no doubt.
You're to rendezvous with an American NSA agent, Maya Starling, who's been assigned to the case. Drive carefully, 007.
So, as well as singing the game's title track, Maya appears herself as a character in-game, which is pretty cool, and getting to her is your first objective in this driving-focused level. The Streets of New Orleans map will be utilized again later on, and it's just one of my very favorite driving level maps in all of Bond. It feels so big and sprawling, in no small part down to the fact that they include so many different areas in it. Like, you have the super modern skyscraper district, then you have the old town, you got suburbs, docks, an industrial zone. I think this is some really terrific level design, and in all honesty helps the map feel more expansive than it is in reality, but I just really love driving around this place. Also, shout out to a lovely little Easter egg in the form of the Phoenix Corporation logo appearing on the side of one of the buildings. Phoenix, of course, being the company owned by Raphael Drake, the main villain from the previous Bond game, Nightfire, which itself, of course, included a reference to its predecessor's villainous corporation, Malprave Industries. I adore these details, and again, it just really felt at this point in time like EA Games were developing their own Bond universe with these things, which is just so cool. It does beg the question of how Phoenix Industries as a company survived when their previous owner was holding the world to ransom with nuclear missiles from his space station base. I can't imagine that does you any benefits on the stock market, but anyway. M instructs Bond to meet with Agent Maya in a park, which seems like a dangerous thing to have Bond do, I'd have thought. Him meeting a beautiful woman in a park at night sounds like the start of a public order offense. But rather than partaking in some dogging, Maya calls Bond on a public phone as she can't get out of her undercover gig as a nightclub singer. Maya tells Bond to investigate Yayakov's warehouse, and to do that, he'll need to hijack a transport truck, so it's off to the nearby diner to steal an employee's vehicle while he enjoys some gumbo. Poor guy, he's only a driver that just so happens to work for an evil organization, and he's probably going to lose his job for this. It really is the blue-collar workers that suffer the most when Bond gets involved in taking down the people that they work for, isn't it? Getting from the park to the gumbo diner is also the level's Platinum Award challenge. You have to make the trip in less than 38 seconds rather than the 1 minute 9 seconds you're granted on 00 Agent otherwise. I didn't think this was too difficult. There's a nice shortcut you can utilize at one point, which also gives you your first Bond moment of the level, where Bond crashes through a Mardi Gras parade and causes absolute havoc. Make note of this terrifying sun balloon that drifts off, by the way. It will be making a reappearance later on. I'll point it out when we get there. Once you get to the diner, you can load up the Aston Martin onto the back of the truck to secure the level's second Bond moment, and then it's time to infiltrate the compound, plant a tracking device on the other truck that is there, and then inexplicably listen in on a phone conversation that is happening on another floor inside a building.
Yes, Mr. Diavolo? Somehow, inexplicably, Yayakov has allowed a double agent to infiltrate the club. He's going to take care of her tonight. And then you are going to take care of him. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. Don't make me take care of you.
I must have missed the briefing where Bond was given some kind of Q hearing aid to allow him to listen in on this conversation. But whatever, it's time for some action. Hop back in the Aston and pursue that henchman through the streets. Another Bond moment is available here if you drive into this large pipe to escape the factory. Love how you crash through a Phoenix warehouse too, because absolutely that company. It's a fun bit of action trying to destroy the limo, and obviously other goons enter the fray. You have machine guns and missiles as you'd expect, but also a couple of gadgets in the form of an electromagnet, which serves to slow down enemy vehicles, as well as an acid slick, which counts as a gadget rather than a weapon, so it operates on the rechargeable battery, and it's definitely the cleaner way to disable the limo. Get in front of it and use the slicks to take it out pretty quickly, and secure yourself a Bond moment too. Bond gets the name of Yayakov's club from the henchman, who sounds like he had a change of voice from what we overheard earlier.
Yes, Mr. Diavolo?
I can't! He will kill me!
Similar to the General earlier on, I feel like there are some instances in this game where certain voice performances have maybe been chopped and changed around, potentially during the game's development, which has led to some inconsistencies. The voice we hear from the henchman earlier on, when he's supposed to be on the phone with Diavolo, actually sounds an awful lot like how Yayakov is going to sound. We'll find out in the next level. Now, admittedly, this is not something that I'm picking up on or that is bothering me all that much when I'm just playing the game and having fun. But it is something that's stands out to me in a game that I otherwise think feels pretty polished regarding the voice work across the board. All that's left to do is make it to the club before the timer runs out and the level is completed. If you're new to the game or replaying the thing for the first time in a while, I highly recommend going full screen with the map, because some of these old town streets are blocked off for the Mardi Gras parade, meaning that you could end up taking a much longer route than expected if you think you can head a certain way when actually you can't. Interesting thing here, when you initially pick up the truck from the Gumbo Diner, it's definitely advisable to load up the Aston Martin into the truck for use during this bit where you have to pursue the henchman's limo. But if you don't do that, you can just continue on using the van as your primary mode of transport. It might be a bit of an ask on harder difficulties, but on an agent playthrough, I actually did succeed in completing the level using the van to ram the henchman's limo and then made it to the club in time. As I say, it's a much harder thing to do when you don't have the Aston speed or gadgets, but nice that you have some variety on offer. Next up is the Kiss Kiss Club, another of my very favorite environments of the game. First of all, calling it the Kiss Kiss Club is a very nice reference. We do like that a lot. And secondly, this level makes very good use of a lot of the game's mechanics. If only Pierce Brosnan was as enthusiastic about this as me.
Let's see about that southern hospitality.
Is this a safe place for me to admit something? So, I love that Pierce Brosnan was able to lend his voice to this game. I think his participation gives it a certain authenticity that it wouldn't have otherwise. And yet, there are a lot of places where I just wish he sounded more like he actually wanted to be here. It feels ungrateful of me to even be going down this line of critique, because how lucky are we as Bond fans to have an extra bona fide, legitimate James Bond performance from Pierce Brosnan to include along with his 4 movies. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if his voice performance is particularly good here. It's hit and miss, let's say that. There are places where I think he does a really good job.
Interesting technique, Serena. Careful!
And places where I think it sounds like he was back in the recording booth immediately after a particularly filling lunch and he'd be rather snoozing on the couch.
A platinum idea. It's time to test Mr. Diablo's metal.
Now, this is obviously a complex thing, and might not be down to Brosnan entirely. Maybe it was the direction he was given, maybe it was the fact that they just had such a short amount of time with him that it was a case of just doing one take and that's it. And hey, you know what? Not every great actor necessarily makes a great voice actor. It is a different kind of a skill. John Cleese, for example, is an actor that I would point to and say, like, oh wow, okay, he is a phenomenal voice actor, and I think he is certainly the strongest in terms of the cast that we have here. And hey, Brosnan is not exactly alone in this when it comes to cinematic voice actors voicing their James Bond character in-game. I'm not going to be pointing to either Sean Connery in From Russia with Love or any of Daniel Craig's performances in the 3 games he lent his voice to as being especially great examples of the art of voice acting. But would I want to live in a timeline where these guys didn't voice the character in those respective games? No, of course not. So while Brosnan may occasionally sound like he needs to be given a Red Bull to stop him from just exhaling through this whole thing, I do nevertheless want to make it clear that I do think we are so damn lucky that he is here playing the James Bond character one final time. Anyway, back to the Kiss Kiss Club. Bond is turned away at the door, but screw you, doorman, because there's another way to gain entry and pleasure a random woman at the same time, which bags you a Bond moment.
I want the full treatment today. Give me everything. Oh my. We've learned a few new tricks, haven't we? Could you be a dear and get me a drink, please?
The first part of the level sees you trying to gain entry to the club's main hall, while a really lovely jazzy rendition of Maya's Everything or Nothing plays. I love how atmospheric this level is, hearing the slightly muffled performance happening in the other room, the dark, intimate lighting, but then the blue glow from the CCTV screens, and this praise only continues for me when you do get into the main room of the actual club, which looks like it would actually be a really cool place to visit if it weren't being run by a maniacal villain, if we overlook the fact that they have actual sharks in giant tanks swimming about the place, of course. I love me some jazz, but I'd probably have a hard time relaxing in this environment knowing there's a great white shark casually swimming behind me. As Bond makes it into the club itself, he comes face to face with Yayakov.
Drop your weapon. You're surrounded. Who are you?
Bond. James Bond.
Oh, you're coming with me. Kill him.
James!
So all that's left to do is to fight your way out in order to rescue the captured Maya. Love how you take cover behind this bar, but it's just being absolutely decimated by the shotgun hits. The level's second Bond moment comes here, where you can drop a lighting rig on some goons to take them out. The third is attainable immediately after by shooting these guards up on the balcony, with one falling over to the ground. Now, if you're on operative difficulty, you can just follow where Yayakov exited and take the hidden door through a final corridor, take care of the guards there, and finish the level. On Agent and above, though, the door to the backstage area requires a key card, which means you need to head upstairs and find it while battling your way through more guards. The Platinum Challenge for this level is another of the hardest ones in the game as far as I'm concerned, as you have to complete the whole thing without using any ammo at all. Why have you forsaken me? Why? But again, similar to the Ruined Tower, the challenge gave me a greater appreciation of some of the game's mechanics, and specifically in this case, something that I haven't touched on yet, but the ability to pick up certain items you can find around levels and use them as weapons. These take a lot of forms. There are crowbars that you can grab and use to bludgeon enemies with, but this is a club, so obviously there are lots of bottles hanging around, which you can pick up and use as weapons, as well as things like computer keyboards, and the levels are so well designed that if a challenge is requiring you to use very little ammo or no ammo at all, chances are there will be an abundance of items around, and it basically comes down to replaying the levels, getting used to the environments, where specific items are, how many enemies appear in certain spots, and doing the maths to kind of work out how you can get by them with what you have available. Speed is another crucial element though, and the stealth suit can help you slip by guards in places where it would be suicide to take them on otherwise. The invisibility mechanic itself is not one of my absolute favorites in the game though, and I tend to find it a bit glitchy, and it'll knock off if you make movements that are considered too sudden. But when the battery is depleting fast and you need to get to where you need to get to fast, sometimes I found just even like a light run would deactivate it. And I totally understand why the thing needs some limitations, because otherwise it'd feel like a complete cheat to use it if there were no drawbacks, but I just found it frustrating to the point that unless I really had little to no other alternatives, I just wouldn't use it all that much. So on to the next level, which is one of two options depending on how you've been doing on your gold medal collecting so far. As I mentioned earlier on, I'm saving talking about the awards more broadly until the very end of the video, but I do kind of need to talk about this one here because it is a fully fledged single-player level that takes place specifically at this point in the story, but is only unlocked once you achieve 11 gold medals, which is essentially every level prior to this. So if you really want to play the thing in order, you need to make sure you're getting gold on every level to this point. Underworld is a pure combat level as you make your way through more of the Kiss Kiss Club's backstage, take down goons, and really just get from point A to point B. There are no Bond moments, no gold or platinum award targets, though it can be played on any of the 3 difficulty settings. It's a fun level. I find it a bit weird that it's held back as a bonus when it takes place during a very specific part of the story. It's not like it features any narrative details that you need in order to continue the story. You can just totally bypass this level, and you don't miss anything other than an excuse to just shoot some more bad guys, which is admittedly at the core of what we're all here for, right? Death's Door does continue the story though, and provides us something of a glimpse into what a James Bond starring horror movie would look like as Bond battles his way through a really atmospheric cemetery in order to save Maya, who has been passed off to this charming-looking gentleman, Jean Le Rouge. I wonder if he's available for birthday parties. I feel like we're just a couple of zombies away from this feeling like James Bond has set foot in a Resident Evil game, and I say that as a compliment. The James Bond movie series has dabbled in horror elements occasionally, especially during the Roger Moore era. I feel like there were scenes that, if not necessarily frightening for young viewers, certainly had lasting unnerving edges to them. You know, most people I think acquire a fear of clowns from watching It when they're in their formative years. I think for most Bond fans, though, it was watching Octopussy. So having James Bond go about a mission set in a creepy cemetery feels like another Moore era callback that I'm totally here for. It has such a great atmosphere. The rain, the lightning, you can see Bond's breath. It's another one of those levels that on the face of it is quite small in terms of footprint, but it's so intricately designed and the objectives you have to do really make the most of the space. There's very little dead weight to the levels in this game overall, I would say. That being said, Agent and Above is definitely the way to play this. It's another level that is significantly shorter if played on operative difficulty, but also removes the need to perform one of the highlights of the whole level for me. So on operative, you enter the first dilapidated building you come across, acquire a sniper, go up to the balcony, shoot the gate you need to get through in order to move on to the next phase of the level. On Agent and Above, the rundown building is actually locked, so you need to find the key, which requires you to rappel up the bell tower, take out the guard that's there, and then head back. But while you're heading back, a bunch of goons appear and rocket launch the tower, which explodes in such a bombastic fashion, it feels like it's spectacle enough for for a Bond moment, but I guess Bond isn't actually performing this action himself, so maybe it's the first Bond moment of the game we award to a couple of nameless henchmen. This section of the level has 4 Bond moments on offer, one with the trusty Q-Spider, which you can use to acquire some body armor on the lower floor of the derelict building. The next one is an interesting one. So when you reach the bell tower, a bunch of bad guys appear for you to mow down. One of them heads straight to this gate and tries to open it, and preventing him from doing so earns you the Bond moment. It's a weird one because it feels like you're just kind of killing a caretaker, really, but I guess in theory having the gates open puts you at a disadvantage because then enemies could start coming at you from multiple angles. And if my high school history class has taught me anything, it's that fighting a war on 2 fronts seldom leads to victory. The third Bond moment on offer comes from defeating this bell tower guard with hand-to-hand combat, and the fourth comes from using the sniper to destroy the security box that opens the gate to the crematorium. The Platinum Award is granted by completing this first section of the level in 3 minutes and 15 seconds, which was another timer challenge that I barely made. How unfair that the timer continues ticking down even when the level is fading out.
Seems you've passed, by the skin of your teeth.
And then it's on to the second part of the level, which is a really cool boss battle with Jean LaRouge. Maya is dangling from a hook on a conveyor belt that is moving closer and closer to an incinerator, and you need to take down LaRouge while also having some back and forth with him over the conveyor belt. He's starting it and you're stopping it. There are 2 Bond moments to achieve while battling with LaRouge, both involving using elements of the environment to cause him damage, one from the fuel barrels and another from these gas vents, but be wary that these traps can also be used to hurt you too. I love this battle, and it contributes towards Death's Door feeling like a complete package of a level. With Everything or Nothing, a lot of the levels are kind of small and the story is fragmented over so many of them that occasionally they just kind of feel like they come to a bit of a premature end because the actual climax to that part of the story is 2 levels away. But as I say, Death's Door delivers the goods on all fronts. Expect this to rate highly when I inevitably get to my tier ranking video for Everything or Nothing. Because if the internet needs one thing, it's more of me talking about Everything or Nothing. Killing LaRouge and freeing Maya leads you into the next level, Battle in the Big Easy, another vehicle-based level that makes more use of the New Orleans map from earlier. Bond and Maya race to the nearest convenient vehicle, which in this case is this purple LED sporting limo, apparently, and it's nice to see that even when in a life or death hurry, Bond is ever the gentleman and holds open the car door for Maya. The level kicks off with the objective of taking Maya to Bond's lair, which feels like an odd word to use. I would have thought base or safe house would have been more fitting rather than lair, which just connotates villain to me. The first section of the level very quickly turns into a speed scenario where you must maintain a certain amount of motion, otherwise the car will explode, so you need to keep the pace up while Maya works on deactivating the bomb. Love that when she's done with that, she starts popping out of the sunroof, dual-wielding machine guns in order to attack enemies. There's just something funny about her acting like a sexy, deadly jack-in-the-box that never fails to make me smile. Despite being in some random villain's car, the thing does nevertheless have a smoke screen feature which you can use on an enemy in order to earn the level's first Bond moment. Bomb defused and enemies defeated, it's into Bond's lair we go, which is actually a pretty elaborate setup beneath the streets that crucially is holding Bond's Aston Martin Vanquish. Wait a minute, I thought we left that thing outside of the Kiss Kiss Club earlier, didn't we? Whatever, I guess the more important thing to note is the ridiculously stocked bar in this thing. Exactly how much liquor is the man anticipating to go through on this mission? Are we sure he isn't running illicit club nights down here as a side earner? Next objective, now that you're back in the Vanquish, is to head over to Diavolo's compound and destroy it, where the RC car comes in handy, once again deploying it and sending it into the factory, using its laser to destroy some generator, starts a chain reaction that brings the whole thing down, which probably highlights that this building was not at all fit for commercial usage, given how quickly just one explosion decimates the entire thing. Destroying the compound with the use of a single RC car earns you another Bond moment, and all that's left to do is to fight your way through the level's remaining goons to make it back to Maya's apartment. Getting back to her place quickly earns you the third and final Bond moment of the map, but it's also a bit of a nebulous one, as there isn't a specified time. Even in the Prima guide, it just says to get there quickly in order to earn the moment, but how quickly are we talking? Quick enough to allow time for a shag, I'm guessing. The level's Platinum Award is also speed-based, and like most of the driving levels in the game, is one of the easier ones to acquire. You need to get from Bond's lair to Diavolo's compound in less than 55 seconds. By this point, you'll likely know what the best route to get there is anyway, so I don't think this one would cause players that much trouble. The level ends with a cutscene that implies Maya is about to become Bond's first confirmed shag of the story so far.
Thank you for saving my life.
Perhaps you can return the favor sometime.
Who's keeping score? Come inside.
Faded Splendor is the next level of the game, which sees Bond following the signal of the tracker he planted on Diavolo's truck earlier to an old plantation in the bayou. James Bond back in a bayou? Please tell me this is foreshadowing the return of everyone's favorite James Bond side character.
You just try that in my bayou, boy! I'd hold your ass!
Hell, he made an appearance in 007 Racing, so EA Games set a precedent for themselves. Anyway, Bond acquires a sniper and spies Yayakov, saying goodbye to Diavolo and Dr. Nadanova.
Why, but isn't my old friend Katya? So much for dinner in London.
Why the hint of surprise in your voice there, James? Do you not remember just a few levels ago when you witnessed her throwing Serena out of a helicopter? I appreciate this little discrepancy is likely to things being rewritten or just even overlooked, but I do like the implication that it's only now that Bond is all so much for dinner in London. Whereas before, even after witnessing her attempted murder, he figured that maybe a date was still feasible. Diavolo and the Doctor take off, so it's time for Bond to explore Yayakov's house, which is another of the more interesting locations of the game. Once again, I'm getting a View to a Kill flashback. This grand old empty house with sheets over the remaining bits of furniture. It's in a totally different part of America, of course, but outside of the story, it does just kind of feel like a level set in Stacey Sutton's home. Can't wait for the Bond moment that involves successfully baking a quiche.
What is it?
An omelette.
To say this whole level is confined to a house, it feels like one of the more sprawling maps of the whole game. The fact enemy snipers are operating inside the building should probably speak to how big this place is. There are so many nooks and crannies to explore, and the place is absolutely swarming with guards, so even though your only main objective is to find Yayakov's lair, you can actually spend a good bit of time in this thing. It's also one of the easiest environments to become a bit lost in. It's a miracle Bond was ever able to find his way out. 3 Bond moments to achieve on this level. The first is acquired by using stealth attacks to take out the guards in the area in which you begin the level without alerting the sniper above, so need to make use of takedowns and the stealth suit to snag that one. The second is one of my favorites of the whole game. Use Bond sense to target this giant chandelier in the main room, and if you're able to kill several goons with it, the point is yours. Now, this is another level with a pretty sizable distinction between playing on operative or agent and above in relation to this main room in particular. On operative difficulty, the door that you need to get through in order to get to the next wing of the house is just open for you to stroll on through right away. On agent and above, though, the door is closed, and you need to activate a couple of switches in order to get it open, and each of these switches triggers waves of guards to come for you. The level's third Bond moment is another really cool one. You can access this hidden weapons stash in a room just beyond the locked door, which is full of armor, shotguns, machine guns, and you can even close the door from the other side if you want to have some privacy. In that hidden room, there's a little passage for you to send your Q-Spider down, and if you follow it right to the end, you can get a head start on taking down some guards that you'd otherwise come to later, but funnily enough, doing so isn't a Bond moment. Maybe I've just been too conditioned to think at this point that every time I use the Q-Spider it will result in a Bond moment, which isn't the case in practice, and honestly, this was the level where I started using it more as a weapon rather than just something to explore with. The spiders really come in handy for the Platinum Challenge too, which is to take less than 100 points worth of damage throughout the duration of the level. Stealth can only take you so far here, so the Q-Spider and coin grenades really did come in handy in order to take care of goons while maintaining cover. For a later stage level, I thought I was going to have real trouble with this particular Platinum Award, but it ended up being one of the more doable ones if you just take things nice and slow and spam goons with the Q-Spider. Even if it does break my heart to explode so many of my babies, your sacrifices will not be in vain. The level ends when you reach this very techie-looking room, which is right where the next level picks up from, Machinery of Evil, which operates essentially as an elaborate boss battle with Yayakov. Turns out the villain has been... Oh, Cubby Broccoli, you're back!
Yes, I OD'd on factual science and I need to lie down. I rebuilt the science factometer, so we're good to go.
Oh, well, that's brilliant timing, because I actually wouldn't mind getting your take on the science factness of something.
Sure thing.
Turns out Yayakov has been producing nanobots via this gigantic underground processing facility. Oh, steady, girl, steady.
How convenient, Mr. Bond. You are just in time to die.
Oh, say you have no time to die, Bond. Say you have no time to die.
Kill him!
All the silent treatment works as well. I bet you're saving your best witticism for when he meets his end, aren't you? Okay, I can wait. How this level works is Yayakov stays safe from firearms in his bulletproof command center while Bond runs around taking out each of the 4 processing chambers. Destroying each one activates waves of goons, of course, so expect to expend a lot of bullets on this one. You can get a Bond moment by accessing one of the chambers through use of the Q-Spider. The door is jammed, so sending a spider along and into the room and exploding it by the sparking machinery will open it and get you inside. Though the quicker way is obviously obviously just to target the exposed machinery with your weapon and shoot it, but we will never pass up an opportunity to take the Q-Spider for walkies. Another Bond moment is achieved by finding this rocket launcher in the downstairs area right underneath Yakov's command center. You just need to shoot one of the pipes to get at it, pretty easy stuff. And for the third and final Bond moment of the level, you just need to shoot some steam vents to stun some goons in the downstairs area. Once all 4 processing chambers are destroyed, you just need to blow up the exposed transformer cores. No, don't worry, not the shape-shifting robots. Right, okay, good, there we are. Destroying the cores somehow triggers a reaction that leads to Yakov's demise. Oh, can't wait to hear the witty quip that Bond is going to come out with here. What? Nothing? A Bond villain is crushed to death by a giant ball, and Bond has nothing to say to that? Looks like you dropped the ball. That certainly flattened his ambitions. A crushing defeat. Balls to you, Yakov.
Bolus 007.
Maybe Bond's just a bit tired by this point of the adventure, and honestly, I will be too after the Platinum Challenge, because it's another one of those where you can't fire more than 10 rounds of ammo. And on a level, swarming with goons, where you need to save multiple bullets to complete core objectives, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. Well, enter Bond gamer extraordinaire Grazlu 00, who, as well as being the master of GoldenEye, also helpfully uploaded run-throughs for the Platinum Awards of each of these levels, and damn it, did I make the most of his guidance on this one. There are lots of wrenches and the like dotted around the level, and you basically just need to start stockpiling them during quiet patches and then use them to take out enemies when they come at you. For the final task of destroying the transformer cores, rather than opening yourself up to the barrage of goons on the lower level, you can just blow them up by utilizing the trusty Q-Spider, which certainly negates the need for firearms, which is a merciful little hack. Next, it's onto the the Pontchartrain Bridge. For a word with as many letters as that, you'd expect it to have more than just 3 syllables. So this is actually a real-life bridge, the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway. You can rate my pronunciation of that in the comment section below, which currently holds the Guinness World Record as the bridge with the longest continuous span over water in the world. And this level is going to do a great job of making that point, as it seems never-ending. I love how the Prima Guide doesn't even make an effort to include the whole map, it just cuts off. Come on, you cowards, you could have done it as a fold-out. The opening cutscene sets us up for another driving level. I love Bond's little run at the start of that cutscene. First of all, he killed everyone inside that building. What is he running from? Second, I love it when you see on his face that his spidey sense kicks in and he's like, this isn't over yet, is it? Though I don't think his sense could have ever predicted that he'd be finishing out this act of the game's story by chasing Jaws along the Pontchartrain Causeway to stop him from reaching New Orleans with a tanker of nanobots. This is absolutely one of the most exhilarating levels in the whole game. Things begin just outside the plantation house, and there's a little drive through a small section of the bayou. Sadly, no gators or loud-mouthed sheriffs present. But dare I say, all of that is quickly forgotten by the time you get to the bridge itself and you start to experience the transcendental majesty of the Triumph Daytona 600 at full speed. Okay, good. I think I needed snapping out of that. What a genius move to take this bike and plonk it on one of the longest bridges in the world to give players just the simple full-on thrill of driving it really fast. There are still civilian cars to dodge as well as enemies that pop up on bikes, so you also need to earn the speed by making sure you're paying attention to everything around you. Mercifully, if you do make an error and collide with something, rather than kick you back to the very start of the level, you can continue on from pretty much the same spot while it takes away around a third of your health as penance. Your only objective on this level is to stop Jaws' tanker from reaching the city, but they give you a good deal of time to enjoy the ride before a cutscene signals you're getting close as Jaws decides to cause some havoc, and a petrol tanker is immobilized in the middle of the road, setting you up for one of the most epic Bond moments the game has to offer. Small thing, but I love that you can actually activate the bike's flamethrowers during the cutscene. It doesn't really do anything other than set fire to the goons' tires and look incredibly cool, but as a nice little either touch or oversight, I'm not quite sure. I'm grateful it's here all the same. In terms of weapons, you have a shotgun, you have rockets, but the flamethrower feature is definitely my personal favorite, and it gets its most prominent usage here when you have to get up and close next to Jaws and use it to take out his tires, but the same trick works on regular goons too. So, cast your minds back to Mardi Gras mayhem. Remember when Bond ruined the local celebrations and a creepy as hell sun balloon became disconnected from the parade? Well, turns out that was all a setup for its reappearance on this level, which sure as hell had me double taking when I played the game through. I don't know if I ever picked up on this when I was playing this as a teen because it's such a random callback to a cutscene from 7 levels ago, but it's a funny little thing to drop in here for those who are paying attention. The level has 4 Bond moments to collect. There's the fuel tanker one, of course, as well as 2 in the bayou at the very start of the level, one for making a leap over the wire fence and another for destroying this shack with goons outside. Curiously, at the start of the level you have a choice of paths to take, and one of them is certainly more exhilarating than the other as you go up a ramp and crash through a billboard, which is another one of those things that feels like it should be a Bond moment even though it isn't. The level's other Bond moment comes from using this construction area as a ramp to get onto the other side of the causeway. It's an awesome moment, but it does put you on a road where you're driving into oncoming traffic, which depending on how confident you are with the bike's controls might not be the best move. In order to earn platinum on this level, you must disable Jaws' tanker in less than 3 minutes 20 seconds, it says, and yet when the level begins I have 3 minutes 18 seconds in which to do it. I would like to speak to the manager, please. Where are my 2 extra seconds? Whittling down the tanker's health sends it into the water along with Jaws and the nanobots, and I love how by this point in his adventures, Bond knows there's no chance that even drowning could be the end of Jaws.
I have a sinking feeling that won't be the last I'll see of him.
The Pontchartrain Bridge is another one of those elite levels that I can't help but instinctively think of every time I think of Everything or Nothing, much like A Long Way Down. It's such a thrilling level, showcasing a feature that was unique to this game in the world of Bond at this point, the ability to drive a motorbike like this. I think it's a super memorable level and just one of the most fun to play in this entire game. And yet, where is my Sheriff J.W. Pepper?
What are you? Some kind of doomsday machine, boy!
We're in Louisiana, bayous, there's a vehicle chase happening. Surely this would have been a perfect spot for a JW cameo. Would it have been so hard to contrive a reason for him to be riding along in a sidecar next to Bond? It's what the 13-year-old target demo for this thing would want, god damn it. And when I say 13-year-old target demo, I of course mean me. This brings to a close the Louisiana chapter of the game's story as Bond heads back to Scotland for another MI6 interlude.
Ah, Bond. Q has been analysing the sample you recovered.
The nanotechnology is the work of Dr. Nadanova, but upgraded.
Upgraded?
The nanobots were originally designed to fix nuclear reactors by infiltrating their radioactive circuit boards and repairing their control systems.
But Yayakov added an acid cartridge and a swarming program. So, instead of repairing the circuits, they destroy them. In fact, they'll disintegrate anything made of metal.
Like a dam? Or a bridge?
Or a building, or a city. So what keeps the nanobots from destroying each other? The platinum?
Precisely. They're programmed to ignore what they're made of.
Thank you, Q.
Why do I think New Orleans was just a test?
We must find out where Diavolo is going to strike next.
Serena Saint-Germain mentioned a platinum deposit in Peru. I'll start with her.
The geologist you rescued? Check in with Q first.
A platinum idea. It's time to test Mr. Diavolo's metal.
So there we go, nanobots, people. At this point in time, I think my only prior knowledge of nanobots was from all things Jason X, though I know conceptually they've been around in fiction for some time. No Time to Die, of course, centers much of its plot around the villain's use of nanobots as a kind of targeted virus, and I'm on record as not particularly liking that particular usage. It feels to me like the plot there should have just been about a very sophisticated virus rather than microscopic robots. But also, as soon as I hear that word in No Time to Die, even watching it now, my mind immediately goes to Everything or Nothing, which I think is a far greater usage of nanobot technology in a Bond plot. Using them to eat away at metal objects and platinum being the only metal that they can't consume is such a cool idea. I do hope that Jaws has had his teeth capped with platinum. Otherwise, it feels like he's really taking his mouth in his own hands by hanging around in such a close proximity to things that can actually make him toothless. Now, are nanobots in this context a very science fact concept? Yes, so much so that we've had to reinforce the science factometer with platinum. But in the context of where Bond was at this period immediately after Die Another Day, I did not blink an eye at the time. It just seemed cool and futuristic, and this is a game, so they have a bit more liberty, I feel, when it comes to stretching the laws of science fact. Sorry, Cubby. Before heading back to Peru to reteam with Serena Saint-Germain and investigate the Platinum Mine, it's off to Q Branch, where Bond is given a new gadget, another coin grenade, this one with an EMP to short-circuit nearby electronics. I haven't talked much about these grenade gadgets, but I do really love how they're all disguised as coins. It's such a nice little detail. Though maybe not the best of ideas to carry too many of these things around, lest they start jingling around in Bond's pocket. I heard something. So onto a simple exchange, which begins with Serena and Bond arriving at Diavolo's compound and coming up with a plan.
Time to pay Diavolo a personal visit.
But James, that's impossible. You'd have to win one of his races.
Automobile races.
He collects exotic cars, flies in the drivers, has dinner with the winner.
So all I have to do is switch places with one of the drivers.
Even if you could, what makes you think you can win?
I can't afford to lose.
Wait, what? They're going to win the race to facilitate a meeting with Diavolo? Well, I don't think that meeting's going to go down very well, considering that the pair of them saw each other when Diavolo murdered 003 and all of his henchmen know Bond by name. Yeah, the idea that this is their plan to get Bond close to Diavolo doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, what's the plan beyond getting to have dinner with him? Surely he'll have all of his security around him and you're infiltrating his home anyway, so why not just do that in order to get close to him? Well, this is all really to contrive a very fun level that's coming up next, but a simple exchange itself is pretty short. On operative difficulty, you just need to find the room that the race car driver is in and swap places with him. On Agent and above, there's the extra challenge of disabling the security lasers first. This is a stealth-heavy level. Diavolo has some goons patrolling around and you can't let them sound the alarm, so silent takedowns and sleeper darts are going to be your main modes of combat here. It's also a good opportunity to make use of the stealth suit, which I find works pretty well when you're in a slower-paced environment without a bunch of enemies to bump into. I also really enjoyed using the EMP grenades to take out the security cameras throughout the level. It's a nice change up from the usual format of having to shoot cameras to take them out. 3 Bond moments on this level. You get one from deactivating the security lasers, which is just one of your objectives anyway. You get another for using the EMP grenades to knock off at least 4 security cameras, and the final one for finding this ominous secret room out in the courtyard where all there is a single chair and a top-up for your sleeper dart ammo. Begs the question what Diavolo is using this room for, but I think we'll just move on. Maybe it's nothing sinister like horrific torture and it's just where he goes to take his naps. Getting to the driver's room brings the level to a close as Bond gets his kit on and leaves the guy trapped in the bathroom.
Forgive me, but I have a race to win.
Not sure if this is really a foolproof plan on Bond's part. Like, you maybe have, what, 10 minutes before the driver starts, like, banging on the door and shouting out the window for help, but whatever, we have an awesome level coming up next, so let's overlook the contrivances. But first, Platinum, where you have to complete the level in 40 seconds?
Good God.
In actuality, this is absolutely one of the easier ones once you just go hell for leather, get out the sleeper dart and shoot anyone immediately in your path, but otherwise just make a run for it is the best strategy here. The cloak can be very helpful too. You'll be running and probably bump into some goons along the way, so expect it not to last. But yeah, I managed to complete it after not too many attempts, with a whole second to spare. Go me!
Seems you've passed. By the skin of your teeth.
So as I say, the illogical plot of having to win a race in order to come face to face with a villain who already knows who Bond is all to facilitate Red Line, which is just a pure racing level. You're driving this Volotech branded rally car, tearing around a huge section of the Peru village map in order to beat 7 other competitors and finish first in a 3-lap race. If any stage in this game feels like it should be a bonus level, then it's this one to my mind. There's no spycraft here, it's not that you have any gadgets, nothing story critical is going on, and yet it's just really fun to have this random little racing level dropped in like this. It's fun. What more do you want? Feels like it's kind of the main justification for it being here, and sure, yeah, I love this. Your fellow racers can be mean-spirited bastards, though. I guess it speaks to Diavolo's dark sense of humor that he has the track lined with explosive barrels, and your fellow sportsmen are going to try and knock you into them. I get that there are adrenaline junkies out there, but the winner gets a dinner, and the consolation prize seems to be getting away with your life intact, so I'm not sure that Diavolo's incentives for this race are going to work out long-term. Just 2 two Bond moments in this level, both for utilizing shortcuts. The first comes towards the start of the race, where there are two small jumps you can make in sequence to avoid a turn, and the second is a little off-road ditch that you can use to cut a corner. Platinum is another timed challenge. This one involves completing the race in less than 4 minutes and 50 seconds. No real secret to this beyond just driving well, making use of the shortcuts on all 3 laps, and it's a good idea to try and break away from the pack early to avoid falling into any squabbles. We can be gentlemen here, can't we?
I guess not.
Ambushed is the next level where, hey, guess what? Bond's cunning plan of winning a race in order to secure a face-to-face with Diavolo doesn't go down that well.
Your host would like to see you privately, in his suite.
Uh-huh. And my companion?
She'll be safe with us.
At last we meet, face to face, Mr. Bond. I've been looking forward to this, ever since you killed Max Soren.
Then I assume you're looking forward to suffering the same fate.
Pity you're not as quick with your gun as you are with the car.
What did you do with the girl?
She's being taken care of.
Help! Get your hands off me!
Too bad, Mr. Bond. By winning that race, you lost your life and hers. Good night.
Prepare to die, Mr. Bond.
You first.
Nice little callback to GoldenEye there.
Why can't you just be a good boy and die?
You first.
But that is not going to stop me from expressing my incredulity at this plan, which seems to essentially just have been to show up and shoot Diavolo. And it's like, really? Could we not have sent a Q Spider in to do this job? One of those might have actually been more successful. Just keep telling yourself the racing level was worth it. The racing level was worth it. So here you're back in Diavolo's mansion again, but this time it's all-out action as you battle through waves of goons in order to find Serena. On Operative, this is actually a really speedy affair. Serena is just being held in that secret room out in the courtyard from a simple exchange, so it's just a case of fighting your way down there, freeing her, and the level is over. Agent difficulty and above adds the extra objective of having to destroy a fuse box in order to open some shutters that block your way to the courtyard. And you can do this by going out onto the balcony connected to the room that you locked the showering rally driver in earlier and shoot the box to release the shutters. Doing so earns you a Bond moment. Actually, speaking of that rally driver, looks like the chair's gone, so I guess he made it out alive. Not gonna lie, I think it would have been kind of hilarious if there'd just been some frightened civilian wrapped in just a towel running around the level for the duration, but good to know Bond didn't cause death by starvation. The level's other 2 Bond moments are a couple of the more fiddly ones in my experience. One comes from throwing an enemy over a balcony during hand-to-hand combat, which sounds easy enough, but you kind of need to lure them over to the balcony and then hope they get close enough in order for the specific combat action to take place. But you are just kind of hoping for the perfect set of circumstances to align in order for it to happen. It took a fair amount of play for me before I was able to capture it. Now, the third Bond moment comes from gaining entry to this room tucked away on the ground floor. Entering it gains you the moment, but there's also a rocket launcher, a crowbar, and a couple of bits of body armor in here too. Thing is, whether or not you can gain entry to this room depends on whether or not you picked up a fairly innocuous dropped keycard 2 levels ago. Yeah, so on a simple exchange, when you take out the guard in the courtyard, he will drop a keycard. If you pick it up there, great, entry is granted. If not, then you need to replay a simple exchange and pick up the card in order to get into the room. The Platinum Award is granted to players who make it through the level without using any ammo, which at one point would have sounded like an horrific nightmare to me. But actually, I think this is another level that really comes alive when you're actually relying on hand-to-hand combat and whatever items you can come across in order to get by. Similar to the Kiss Kiss Club earlier on, I feel like playing the thing through with the extra challenge gave me a newfound respect for the level design, in all honesty, and how there are just these convenient items scattered around for you to utilize. Rather than a gun, you can just throw a champagne bottle at the fuse box in order to open the shutters, and I was having to get a bit more strategic about when was a good time for me to launch an attack and when was probably best for me to hold back, lest I be obliterated by a goon firing a rocket launcher inside. Diavolo must have some great home insurance in order to cover this. The High Road follows on immediately from Ambushed as Bond and Serena escape in one of my favorite cutscenes of the whole game.
I think we're outnumbered here.
But not entirely out of luck. Forgive me, Q.
The throat clear he does before "Forgive me, Q" is such a lovely moment. For my comments about Brosnan's voice performance earlier on in this video, I can't deny that there is still a magic to having him here and doing these lines. Anyway, it's back in the rally car as you race through the Peru map once again in order to drop Serena back off at her hotel. This game gets some really good use out of this particular environment. This is the 4th time you're playing through a level in it, and by this point it should be a little bit tedious, but there is clearly a very conscious effort to mix up the routes that the players need to take between all of the different levels taking place in this environment, as well as the different vehicles that you're driving around it in, so it always feels kind of fresh despite the familiarity. Case in point, the ramp that you sent the RC car up earlier to cause a distraction with the fireworks, now you can drive the rally car up it to breeze right by some tanks that are blocking the road, and the action earns you your first Bond moment of the level. Doing this portion of the level in the rally car rather than the Porsche is a fun little bit of mixing up as well. It has no weapons, no gadgets, and yet it's as durable as anything. It's Diavolo's Volotech company, so maybe the thing is lined with platinum, which would explain why bikes explode on contact with it. Drop Serena off, and now it's onto the Triumph Daytona 600 in order to investigate a platinum mine on the other side of town. Convenient that the bike is here just when you need it. Q really does do a great job of making sure this thing is in the right place at the right time. Another Bond moment available at the very start of the bike segment by making use of this ramp and driving over the roofs. And everything I was just saying about how it's really impressive that the developers are able to make this same environment feel fresh and fun even after having you play through it 3 times previously. Times that by 7 for this next portion of the level, because I think this is pure genius. How in order to get to the mine, they don't have you go by road. Oh no, not when there are roofs and balconies available. This experience is significantly shorter in the operative mode, as when you reach the main town square, once home to a lovely fountain, RIP, Q pops up to point you in the right direction.
007, we determined a way for you to access the mine. You're not afraid of heights, I trust?
On Agent and above, you actually have to head all the way down to the entrance of the mine where you receive a bit of a more tough love response from M in response to it being blocked off.
M, the route to the mine appears blocked.
Be resourceful, 007, and see if you can find an alternate way in.
Be resourceful! Oh, good point, M. Yes, I'm more than 3/4 of the way through this game now, but I've only made it to this point on a wing and a prayer. I'll overlook the clipped comment, because this is so much damn fun, tearing across the roofs, breaking through banisters, the mix of travel between the village and the ancient walls is awesome. This is the last level to take place in this particular environment, and what a way to say goodbye to it. And that, I'm sure, will come as a relief to the inhabitants of this village, who hadn't even had time to sweep away the debris from that lovely arch being destroyed before Bond comes back to wreak more havoc. It's a sad sight to see the ceramics shop completely out of stock, probably out of business now, thanks to the thoughtless actions of a British secret agent and his geologist bit on the side. Like, yeah, Diavolo might well have been a platinum-obsessed maniac, but at least under his rule, you know, they had a fountain, they had ceramics, they had more fireworks than you'd think would be necessary for a town of this size, but regardless, he let them get on with their lives. And in comes this British guy with the transatlantic Irish accent, making the whole place unlivable. I like to think the next year the villagers will mark this day in the calendar by gathering to burn a tuxedo-wearing effigy on a gigantic bonfire. Anyway, Diavolo sure did go to extremes to block that mine entrance, because it seems that the only other way to get into it is by breaking through a fragile rope bridge, sliding through a giant stone fountainhead thing, final Bond moment of the level, by the way, and then making a giant leap over a ravine. Like, yeah, if that's the only alternative route into this place, then well done, Diavolo, you're running a very thorough operation here. Platinum Challenge is another timed one. This time you have 1 minute and 20 seconds to reach the mine entrance from the point where M has a go at you for not being resourceful enough. It's another case of just knowing the route and not making any mistakes, and of course another case of me barely making it before the timer runs out. Play the clip.
Seems you've passed, by the skin of your teeth.
In Diavolo's plan, it's not long that Bond is in the mine before he is captured by Katia, and then we get the classic Bond is tied up and about to be tortured while the villain monologue scene.
James Bond, delighted you could join us. I guess you're not here for small talk, are you?
Only if you consider using nanobots to destroy New Orleans small.
Look at the big picture. In 12 hours, I will be in Moscow, where my nanobots will destroy the Kremlin. And after I take over Russia, Europe will follow.
I've seen that movie, Diavolo. It always ends badly.
My platinum army is unstoppable, Mr. Bond. My nanotech weapons destroy all metal they touch. And it appears the only weapon you have left is sarcasm. Kill him.
Bye, James.
I love that for all of the science fact stuff in this game, like nanobots, invisible suits, platinum armor, when Diavolo actually has Bond tied up and ready to torture him, he's just gonna kill him with a big old drill. Fortunately for Bond, they did not confiscate one of his EMP coins, and using that short circuits the machine and releases him from capture. Bond must now find a way to reclaim his equipment and escape the mine facility, after setting its destruction in motion, of course. This is another of my absolute favorite environments of the game. I love how this whole operation has been carved into the mountain itself, how the level takes place kind of vertically, with Bond moving up the levels in order to complete his objectives. This conveyor belt bit where you have to shoot the switches to get through the stomping machinery is a lot of fun. It's not necessarily one of the more memorable locations of the game, perhaps it's because it's the only environment that looks like this in the game. While it is the climax of this second Peru-based act of the game's story, the level does feel kind of singular in a weird way. Being set in what seems to be the villain's main base of operations gives it a kind of climactic feel, despite there being a whole 5 more levels left to go. Objective-wise, it's a case of climbing the facility, then destroying the exhaust gear system, and heading to the control center to activate the override switch, which sets the mine on a path to self-destruction. There are 3 Bond moments to collect, one for taking out a guard over the other side of the way by exploding a propane tank, then another 2 that make use of the Q-Spider. One for reaching this armor tucked away underneath some stairs in the control room, and another for using it to disable some security lasers in order to access a room just off of the control room. So these Bond moments come in quite quick succession, and could feasibly be achieved using the same Q-Spider. By the way, I love that Bond has a full-on controller in his hands when he uses this thing. It's such a nice little detail. Platinum Award here is achieved by completing the level in 3 minutes or less. It's another case of the best strategy being to just like run and gun it. Don't bother with Bond moments, just leg it, blasting anyone in your immediate path. Overall, I didn't find this one all that difficult. The most nerve-wracking part of it was just waiting for the lift at the very end and hoping that the timer isn't including the time it's taking between pressing the lift button and then fading out to the cutscene, but mercifully the timer does indeed stop once the lift button is pressed. Another nice GoldenEye callback moment to end the level on, with Bond grabbing onto a helicopter in order to escape the villain's exploding lair. This brings this particular act of the game's story to a close, as Bond lets Serena know where the pair are heading next.
Thanks for the lift. I can take over from here.
Where are we going?
Ever been to Moscow?
And indeed, Moscow, Russia is where the final act of the game's story is set. The urgency of the situation is highlighted by the fact that there is no MI6 interlude between the location change. So it's up to the cutscene of the Platinum War to get players up to speed on the stakes of the situation, and they're pretty big, I guess.
007. Diavolo's invaded Red Square with an army of platinum tanks and is advancing on the Kremlin. The Russian army has been mobilized, but Diavolo's nanotechnology is eating through their tanks faster than they can deploy them. You've got to find a way to stop him.
I've been able to get you a new gadget in the field, 007, the Network TAP. This modified dart gun will let you take control of certain electronic devices, shoot the device that you want to control, and then use it against your enemies. Good hunting, 007.
The nanotechnology is destroying their weapons. The platinum has made our tanks invincible.
First, we take over Russia. Then we unleash our little nanobots on the world.
Launch the second wave!
The Platinum War has you operating one of Diavolo's platinum tanks, and your main mission is to get to the Kremlin and stop Diavolo from setting off a gas bomb underneath the building. Weapon-wise, you have a plasma gun and nanoshells, which can destroy metal objects, like in this moment, where you can earn a Bond move by destroying an archway to take out an enemy tank. Steady, girl. Steady. Another Bond moment is achieved shortly after the first by blowing up a tanker. You can trigger a cutscene which takes out a bunch of guards in some kind of fancy shopping center. Again, the Brosnan era of video games had something of a fixation on tanks, largely down to GoldenEye, of course, with its iconic tank chase scene, so the fact that this game has you piloting a Platinum one feels like a suitably outrageous escalation. As you'd expect, it's a bit slow and clunky to control, and in all honesty, it's not one of my favorite levels of the game as a result. I just tend to find myself getting stuck or being forced to tank several enemy hits because I can't dodge their firepower quick enough. The level does have a very bombastic ending, though. You neutralize the bomb underneath the Kremlin with the nanoshells, and then you can take out several support structures which lead to the climax, where Diavolo is about to plant a gigantic statue of himself outside the Kremlin, and you need to shoot down the plane carrying it with your nanoshells, which then causes the now unsupported ground beneath to cave in and take out all of his tanks. I I love Diavolo's priorities. Like, you haven't even overthrown the administration yet, but damn it, he's planting that statue. While still causing massive amounts of destruction that I can't imagine being very good for British-Russian relations, it's interesting to look back on this now in the age we live in, where Western-Russian relationships are probably more fraught than they ever have been since the Cold War. And yet here in 2004 is James Bond, British secret agent, here in the country fighting to protect its status quo as it was in the early 2000s, and it's kind of surreal in a way. It does make for a pretty beautiful bookend to Brosnan's tenure as Bond, though. GoldenEye, of course, had a whole chunk of the story set in Russia, along with the pre-credits sequence itself. So Brosnan's Bond started in Russia, and he's going to finish in Russia. Platinum Award on this level is yet another timed challenge. Getting a bit sick of them at this point, but you have to neutralize the bomb in less than 2 minutes and 15 seconds. This begins from the very start of the level, and as long as you have the route down and don't stop moving, you should be fine. I had more than 10 seconds left on the clock.
Seems you've passed.
With plenty of time to spare for once, actually. With the ground level forces taken care of, it's time to head underground for the next level, Dangerous Descent.
Know anything about an underground base in the Kremlin?
We're working on it, 007.
This is a terrific level, another one of my absolute favorites, right from the off as well, are two Q-Spider-related Bond moments. The first one at the very start of the level, you can activate a spider, and there's a little obstacle course leading to a room with a big red door that, as an ardent Super Mario World player, kinda had me feeling like we were being prepped for a boss fight with a Koopaling. But rather, if you allow the guard to go about his business, he will unlock the door to reveal an armory, and killing him with an explosion triggers the Bond moment. Now, this is one of those long-term investment Bond moments where it doesn't help you at all on this level, but when we get to the final level, we'll be coming back to this moment. The second Q-Spider Bond moment is achieved by clearing a wooden crate and then sending another one along a path around some boxes and containers to reach a room where you can blow up a computer, which removes a bunch of the security lasers which you will now need to descend around. This particular bit could have been twice as long as it is, as far as I'm concerned. I would have loved it even more, because anytime Bond is rappelling down a wall in this game, I'm just having a blast. There are lasers to avoid, rocket launchers to destroy. This is awesome. When you eventually reach a big moving platform below, it will stop and a floor will open up, whereby you need to reactivate the lift. There are plenty of guards to contend with once again, and another Q-Spider Bond moment. Using Bond sense, you can target some exposed machinery. Shooting it causes a little explosion, which also clears a way for your Q-Spider, which you can then send along a little track and over a now disabled fan that would have otherwise blown the spider to bits. The path eventually leads to a trio of goons that you can take out with an explosion to secure the Bond moment. Oh yeah, by the way, the Q-Spider can now turn invisible too, which, I'll be honest, I feel is maybe a little bit overkill at this point in the game. It's like it's gone full Oprah with, you get to be invisible and you get to be invisible, everything gets to be invisible, to the point that I fully expect the final level of the game to be an invisible Bond fighting invisible enemies in an invisible environment. Once you get the lift going again, Katia reappears.
You're trapped, Bond. You can't win.
I haven't talked about Heidi Klum's casting specifically yet, but along with Brosnan, Dafoe, and Elizabeth, she is one of the biggest names in this cast. She's, of course, the villain's main henchwoman, and I think she does a really terrific job throughout the game. And, you know, I think for someone who is not, you know, typically an actress at least, I think she's mostly known as a model, a presenter, and a host of elaborate Halloween parties. But I think you can hear in her voice that she's just having a blast with this. She's having a good time recording her lines and playing the villain, to the point that I feel like it's infectious. From a writing perspective, I maybe wish that her reveal as a bad guy had had a little bit more of an effect, but then at the same time, I'm very much aware of just how much the good girl gone bad trope had been reused to this point of maybe even overuse in the Brosnan era. World's Not Enough had Elektra, Die Another Day has Miranda, even the two previous video games had characters that were originally set up as allies but turned out to be villains, the evil Zoe clone and Kiko respectively. So by now, the idea that a Bond girl turns bad was just a part of the formula, I guess, along with tanks and things turning invisible apparently. Katia disappears quite quickly, and after dispatching of her rocket-launching army, then taking out the platform's braking mechanisms, the real boss of the level turns up in the form of Jaws with a flamethrower. This is another really cool fight with Jaws. There are very few places to hide, and I love that cover is not even necessarily completely safe. If you remain behind one of these crates for long enough, it will eventually turn red from the heat of the flamethrower and start damaging you, so you do need to keep moving. Waiting until he turns around and then firing at the canisters on his back depletes his health, and then in another GoldenEye callback, I guess Bond must make use of a destroyed jet plane's cockpit ejection in order to finish the level.
Next time I'd take the stairs.
Love the pause after that line with Bond looking around like, damn it, that was pretty clever and there was no one around to hear it. Platinum award on this one requires you to complete the level having taken 100 points of damage or less. Another one where patience is rewarded. You basically just need to take things slow and steady and make use of all cover that is available. Mercifully, the challenge does not include the Jaws boss battle because it's difficult enough to just avoid even peripheral damage from the flames and the explosions, so thank goodness the challenge ends before that. The next level, Red Underground, picks up right where that left off, and Bond has now landed at the bottom of the lift shaft on the broken platform, with Jaws no longer around, and indeed, this is the last time we see Jaws as part of the single-player story. He's a terrific final boss, and each of his appearances throughout the game have been memorable and well-utilized, but I really wish there had just been like a little cutscene of him making it away alive somewhere in these final few levels. Like how The Spy Who Loved Me included that insert shot of him alive at the very end of the film. I guess it's implied, as it's not like his body is here on the broken platform, but I don't know, it might have been nice to just see him deciding that this whole thing really wasn't worth it and climbing out of the shaft and then heading back home to Dolly. I do also think it's a bit of a shame that we have metal-eating robots as part of this plot, and yet you never get to set them on Jaws. It might have been cool to see them eradicating his metal teeth, but oh well. Red Underground begins with more ribbing from M.
Not the escape route I would have taken, but it seems to have done the job.
It's like, alright, M, sure, why don't you take on the flamethrower-wielding, metal-toothed villain next time? We'll see how you fare. Rappelling up a ledge reveals the main body of the level, a gigantic military fortress adorned with communist insignia.
I remember we suspected they had built something like this during the Cold War.
I fear what Diablo may be doing with it.
This is one of my very favorite environments of the whole game. It's so cool having Bond fighting bad guys in this Soviet bunker throwback location. It creates that feeling of really being in the belly of the beast. The level is also one of the more varied ones in terms of how you can go about defeating your foes. Objective-wise, all you really need to do is reach the exit, which leads into the next level. But there's a great variety of guns and gadgets to utilize. You may opt for a bit of stealth before going in guns blazing. It's a pretty freeform level in that regard. I found myself using the Q-Spider a fair bit too. By this point, the thing can fire sleeper darts at enemies, so it's a great little scout to go ahead and take down a few goons before you proceed. Cloaked enemies also appear on this level, which you need to be extra vigilant of, as when they're invisible, your lock-on aim won't work on them. There are a whopping 6 Bond moments to go for on this level. First couple are available close to the start. You get one by sneaking along the platform in order to find a sniper, and the next you get by taking out a very specific guard who is patrolling the walkways above the main level. The next one is really cool. You can use your network tap gadget to hack into the controls of a nearby tank and start taking out enemies with it until at least your battery runs down. The next couple make use of specific traps. On the lower level of the environment, you can shoot some hydraulic controls in order to cause a tank to drop on an enemy, and another way you can take out an enemy by some kind of platinum spray. What a way to go out, huh? And finally, at the very end of the level, you have to make it into this gigantic entrance, and a couple of guards are waiting for you there with rocket launchers. If you throw a strobe grenade to immobilize them before they start firing at you, then you achieve the 6th Bond moment of the level, as well as giving yourself an easier way to take them out. This is absolutely one of my favorite combat-heavy levels of the game, and just a wonderfully crafted experience to utilize almost all of the fighting and gadget mechanics of the game in a location that feels so fitting for Bond in so many ways. But it's also a super challenging one. There are a lot of enemies in this coming at you from multiple vantage points, so the fact that the Platinum Award is going to be dependent on you completing the level having fired 10 rounds or less is surely going to be one of the most difficult things to achieve in this whole game. You'd be right, which is why I did a significant deep dive into a variety of different strategies, honed my hand-to-hand combat skills, agonized over which enemies on which to use my precious 10 rounds of ammunition, trained my thumbs with tiny weights to make sure they were in peak condition for maneuvering. This is a long-term investment. This may take a while, but then the spoils of war, or I could just invisible speedrun the thing. Or yes, I could do that, I suppose. Yeah, another one that I have to thank Graslu 00's walkthrough for, because I was genuinely thinking, how the hell am I ever gonna do this? The Prima guide talks about weapon strategy and using items and such, when really the most foolproof method is just to equip the stealth suit and run. You need to have a powerful gun in your hand like the Desert Eagle, which can take enemies out in one shot or two for the few enemies that might be right in your way. And yeah, the stealth suit is obviously not a foolproof method given how glitchy it can be, but I was surprised at just how feasible it is to achieve platinum on this level in such a short space of time, and is relatively easy once you know the route to take. Surprisingly, one of the quickest platinum challenges of the whole game.
Seems you've passed.
By copying the methods of a player far more skilled than yourself, but still, a pass is a pass. And so it's on to the penultimate level of the story, the final card, which is a bit of a misnomer really, shouldn't it be the almost final card? The level begins with Jarvalo and Katya admiring his giant phallic symbols before turning their attention to Bond, and I love that Willem Dafoe sounds like he's having the absolute time of his life chewing the scenery in this.
What an unpleasant surprise.
You're just in time for the final countdown.
Those missiles have been deactivated, Diablo. The nuclear warheads were removed years ago.
That's quite correct, 007. Except that I replaced them with nanotech payloads, which will do the job just the same. Start the launch sequence. And as for you, Mr. Bond, grab him, throw him into the bottom of a missile silo, and let him experience hell on Earth.
He's so great. Can we start a petition now to have him cast in the next film, please? This is another terrifically grand environment, and very fitting now that we're so near the game's climax. First things first, you need to use your network tap in order to take control of one of the sentry guns and use it to blast Diavolo's little viewing platform there. The explosion it generates would, you think, have been enough to kill both him and Katia, but they will be popping up again a little later on. You can also acquire a couple of Bond moments through this thing, one by using it to destroy the other sentry gun, and then by dispatching the 6 guards that enter the room from a couple of places once you start using the sentry. Mission-wise, you need to disable the missile silo exhaust shunts, and I just love the contrast in the voice performance here with John Cleese giving it his all and Brosnan sounding like he's about to doze off at any second.
007, if you can seal off those large silo exhaust shunts, the flames and the heat will destroy the missiles when they launch.
Those control panels should do the trick.
Don't be ungrateful, Calvin. You love Pierce. You're happy he's here in any capacity. Just keep that in mind. So it's a case of zipping around the environment, activating each of the 4 buttons in turn. As you'd expect, enemies are especially challenging at this point of the game, but nevertheless, a good challenge, I would say. At no point in Everything or Nothing do I ever feel like it veers into frustratingly difficult territory. I think the difficulty level throughout is quite expertly balanced, in fact. Another Bond moment is attainable by using an EMP grenade on a nano-suit-wearing bad guy in order to expose them. And the final moment is a bit of an interesting one. So in one of the areas there's a vent for a Q-Spider to go through, and if you send it along and take out the 2 guards waiting in the area with the Spider's sleeper darts, you get the final Bond moment of the level. So on Agent difficulty and above, the switch you have to press in that area with the now snoozing guards is initially not working, so you need to send a Q-Spider into more vents to discover a wrench has been jammed in the mechanism, and you need to dislodge it in order to proceed. With all 4 silo exhausts taken care of, it's time to fight your way through a final batch of baddies and make your way to the exit. The Platinum Award on this map is to complete the level taking 100 points of damage or less, which basically requires a super slow and steady approach of getting snug behind some cover and then making sure you take out every guard currently on the level before proceeding and triggering the next wave. Q-Spiders really did come in handy a lot here, especially as the sleeper darts on these things are unlimited, so long as you have enough battery saved up, of course. Level over, and Bond is casually strolling his way back through the previous environment, coming to a lift that he's riding to the surface, but his spidey sense starts to tingle. And sure enough, Diavolo and Katia appear in a jet for a final boss battle of the level.
You may have stopped the missiles, Bond, but you haven't stopped me.
This is nuts and totally cool to have a showdown with the villains in a jet that is so confined and is making these strange erratic movements as a result, but has so much firepower behind it. It's this really demented scenario. As Bond, you have to first fire rockets to destroy the right and left missiles on the jet, and then finally the nano bomb in the center. Doing so triggers a cutscene that you wouldn't be blamed for assuming would be the last you see of both these villains. So yes, Diavolo survives thanks to his ejector seat and makes it into the very final level of the game. Not sure what went wrong with Katia's ejector seat. We never see her again, so presumably she does indeed meet her end at the bottom of that shaft. But it would have been nice to have a more pointed death moment for her, as she is something of a primary antagonist in this game. Everything or Nothing is the last level of Everything or Nothing, and I can't help but feel like at this point, in terms of pacing of the story, this is maybe just one level too many. And I know that complaining about too many levels in Everything or Nothing is like calling over a waiter to complain about your steak being too perfectly cooked, but I feel like we just had 2 really tough levels in really fantastic environments. We had a pretty perfect kind of like final boss setup with the villains inside that fighter jet, and it's like, do we really need to have another level on top of this? Well, if we do, it better be a damn good one, and indeed, Everything or Nothing is a super challenging final test of your skills and utilizes a whole load of mechanics you'll have picked up throughout the game, and with it being the last level, the stakes are suitably high.
Bond, one of the missiles has been reactivated. We believe it is targeted on London. An unknown source has tapped into the network directly from a telemetry tower in the launch area itself. You must get to the launch area and stop that missile.
A couple of Bond moments are available in quite quick succession right from the off. Remember a few levels ago when you sent the Q-Spider into that room with the big red Koopaling door? Well, now it's time to reap the rewards of that. Sending a Q-Spider back along that very same route and into the room, you can take out a guard with a sleeper dart and then explode the spider to take out the barrier that was keeping the door locked. That's Bond moment 1. Then as Bond, you can waltz into the room, and it turns out it's a pretty stocked armory full of everything a player could possibly want for an explosive and bullet-heavy final battle. From that point on, you're working your way through a variety of rooms and areas of this facility. The Q-Spider comes in handy again to scout ahead and take out guards with its sleeper darts to clear your path a bit. The main room you end up spending the bulk of your time in is this giant warehouse full of shipping crates which form a kind of maze that you need to work through, and there are so many guards to take care of with a variety of weapons including automatics, shotguns, snipers, rockets. This gets appropriately explosive at a few points, and the level's third Bond moment is one that I think is a lot of fun, where you can use Bond sense to fire at a glowing switch and cause a container to crush an enemy below. Doing so secures you the Bond moment, which is surprisingly the last one of the game. I would have thought the last level would have had more than just 3, especially when there are still a good amount of places to explore on this level and spots to rappel up to that aren't necessarily signposted. It is one of, if not the most challenging levels in the game to complete, especially on higher difficulties, and yet maybe it's because the environment just isn't terribly inspiring. I do feel like the previous level would have been a better space to have the climax of this story. It was just a bit more of an impressive environment than the set of warehouses that you have to make your way through here, where getting to another big red door signals the end of this portion of the level. I do want to be clear that I'm aware I'm being an absolute nitpicky little bitch when I'm talking about this. And don't get me wrong, I am still having more fun in even a matter of seconds in Everything or Nothing than I am in the whole experience of playing the likes of 007 Legends. Everything or Nothing is one of the greatest Bond games of all time, and I absolutely do not want to lose sight of that. But yeah, I just kind of feel like the story is kind of over by the end of the previous level, and this feels more like a bonus than a fully fledged finale. Or maybe I'm just butthurt because the Platinum Challenge on this one is a real humdinger. Complete mission in 300. Wait, what? 300 what? Do I have to go all Gerard Butler on this thing? I'd count that as a Bond reference, actually. The actor is in Tomorrow Never Dies, after all. No, rather, that's a typo. It's actually that you need to finish the first portion of the level in 5 minutes or less. There's little to no chance of taking out every enemy you come across with such a restriction, but it is a trial and error case of working out which enemies exactly you need to take care of, which ones are going to cause a massive hindrance, potentially, but also just legging it across the thing and making the most of your stealth suit and explosives is a way to victory. The big warehouse container room is easily the most challenging element of this, but would you believe that I actually did achieve a successful run and I made it with more than 35 seconds left on the clock? What the hell? I could barely finish levels far easier than this with a final time that didn't include exclusively zeros, but this is the one that I actually do pretty good on.
Seems you've passed.
And quite frankly, 007, I can't f***ing believe it. And so it's onto the climax of the story mode, which takes Bond out onto the missile launch pads for a showdown with Diavolo.
This is where you die.
This is such a great final confrontation. I'd hold back from calling it a boss battle, given that it's over kind of quickly, depending on your difficulty setting. You fire off a bunch of rockets up at Diavolo's tower, and eventually it explodes and he falls to his death down the missile silo, which is amazing. However, the rocket is still firing, so you need to head to a nearby turret and... oh yeah, right, avoiding the exhaust is a good idea too. But yes, head to a nearby turret and fire off a few shots at the missile to destroy it, as a final cutscene concludes the epic story that has been Everything or Nothing.
What happened?
They fell for each other.
And, what about us? Oh, James. What was that for?
Call it a hint of bigger things to come.
Jesus Christ, if you're a person who considers I Thought Christmas Only Comes Once a Year as a particularly bawdy line to ring out a Bond adventure, then I don't know what you make of this. Maybe we should just be grateful that he doesn't start humping her right there in the middle of Red Square. The credits roll to a funky techno remix of Maya's Everything or Nothing theme. James Bond will return. He will indeed, but at the time of playing this thing back in early 2004, I can't say I would have predicted that the next couple of returns would be as a generic cipher for a cameo in GoldenEye Rogue Agent and then as actual Sean Connery himself in From Russia with Love. But don't you just love how unpredictable the James Bond franchise can be? Similar to Nightfire, the game treats you to a little making-of featurette featuring comments from the voice cast.
I've always felt with these kind of games that the more real they are, the better they are, you know? And the reality of these games is very, very close to the reality of the Bond movies.
John Cleese the gamer. Can't say I could have predicted that. It's a lovely little thing. You don't even need to complete the game to watch it. You can just view the credits directly from the options menu and it plays right after, but nevertheless, it feels like a nice little reward for completing the game. Personally speaking, I would have liked to have heard from some of the developers as well, rather than just the voice cast, but hey, it's cool to see the actors having their faces scanned and stuff. I've always loved Heidi Klum's infectious enthusiasm coming through in her interview snippets too.
I play Katyana Donova, and I'm an ex-KGB agent, and I'm a real bad girl. I can't wait to play myself. myself. I wonder how that's gonna be.
Difficult, if you must know. I hope someone explained to Heidi after all this that the only way she'll be able to play as herself is in the arena multiplayer mode, and even to do that will require her to grind points to unlock her own playable skin. For your sake, Heidi, I hope they gave you a copy with your skin already unlocked. The thing ends with these comments from John Cleese, which are, on the one hand, lovely, on the other hand, heartbreaking, considering he never ended up playing Q again after this.
It's lovely that Bond is really so loved, and that it's out there on a regular basis, and you know, we're missing making a movie this year, so the game is there.
But let's not dwell, because we still have a surprising amount of additional content to talk about. First off, completing the game's story mode automatically unlocks a couple of bonus levels, MI6 Combat Simulator and the MI6 Survival Test. These exist in the VR wireframe land that you had to train in earlier on, and in Combat Simulator you basically have to survive as many rounds as you can and progress from round to round by defeating enemies. Survival Test, on the other hand, has enemies constantly respawning and you collect points by defeating them, and the test ends when you run out of health. Nice little extras if you want to just kill a few minutes, I think. The environment you're in isn't particularly big, but it's cool that the game kind of leaves it up to you depending on what kind of tact you want to take to dispatch of these wireframe goons, so there's the potential for great replay variety here. Now onto the rewards themselves. As I mentioned long ago at the very start of this video, gold medal awards are basically split into 3 main categories. The most common being the production stills. There are 14 of these, and each unlock gets you a piece of concept art as well as a behind-the-scenes snap of a member of the cast. I really do love seeing concept art, whether it be for video games or films or TV shows, so I've always really liked these things. Next is a variety of weapon upgrades for your vehicles, a very handy extra when it comes to replaying the levels, and especially for the harder difficulties, as the extra firepower and damage infliction from these upgrades gives a real boost. They can be activated on or off on the rewards menu, so it's nice to have that option of whether or not you want to use them too. You can generally tell if you're using the upgraded weapons by the machine gun fire, which is now blue for some reason, but also incredibly powerful. Now here's one for the perverts. There are 4 gold medal unlocks that provide players the option of alternative character models for Serena, Maya, Miss Nagai, and Katya, where the characters are wearing skimpier outfits with more skin on show. I still remember being initially confused by this particular set of rewards when I was a teen, because the first one you unlock is Serena, and yeah, I see that she has her G-string on show now and everything, but honestly her default model already has plenty of skin on show anyway, so I thought this was an unlock for multiplayer mode at first, and then I realized that multiplayer operates on different save files, so this one just had me stumped for the longest time. But by the time you get around to unlocking Katya in her platinum dominatrix gear, it becomes clear what the intention is. It's a fun little extra though, I guess. Again, I feel like this is very much targeting the 13-year-old demo this thing is aiming for, but it does bother me that when you activate it, it creates a continuity error when you go from gameplay to the pre-rendered cutscenes that still use the character's default models, but whatever, never mind. And hey, where's the equal opportunities here? It's exclusively the women that have this feature. Where's our skimpy Q alternative character model to balance things out? And finally, the coolest, but also perhaps weirdest gold extra is unlocked for attaining all 27 gold medals, and this is another bonus level in the form of Gallery. Set to the jazzy rendition of Maya's Everything or Nothing, this allows players to saunter around a virtual art gallery full of concept material, promotional stuff, stills, statued character models, and props like Jaws' teeth. Now, I absolutely love this. There's really nothing to it beyond just wandering around and looking at stuff, but I think it's so awesome that they went to the effort of including this. It's so much more fun than if all these same things had just been part of a giant slideshow. And you know what? I do love behind the scenes stuff, so getting to geek out out at the additional concept art, as well as treating some of the assets like character models and props like exhibit material, really gives you a new and different kind of appreciation for them, I think. But at this point of the video, a good few of you may well be wondering, who the hell is this young lady that you're controlling around this space? Well, we'll get to that very shortly, but first we have some Platinum Award cheats to discuss. There are 13 of these available as you accrue Platinum Awards. Interestingly, and a bit frustratingly, these cheats are presented as button input codes, but you still need to unlock the ability to use them. So if, for example, your mate had achieved all of the awards available and told you the button input code for unlimited ammo, and you intended on using it at the start of a brand new game, no luck, I'm afraid. You still need to put the work in for your particular save file. So yeah, you unlock, you head to the menu and scribble down the code, and then when you start a mission, pause, input the code, the cheat will activate. Obviously, using these nullifies your scores for the levels, so the cheats are very much here as fun extras for replay value. Most of these do exactly what they say on the tin and relate to improved, full, and eventually unlimited battery and ammo, double damage, improved traction in the cars, but there are a handful that I do want to talk about specifically. First being the Golden Gun, which is amazingly the first cheat code you can unlock, and I still remember thinking this was mad back when I was a teen, allowing players to achieve the one-shot kill weapon as the first Platinum unlock? How the hell could things possibly escalate from there? Well, it is indeed the Golden Gun, and I love how it holsters on Bond's stealth suit, but it is not a one-shot kill weapon in this incarnation, unfortunately, which technically means it's a less proficient weapon than the sleeper darts. It's here as a fun inclusion rather than the ultimate handgun it was in previous Bond video game incarnations, but they nailed the look of the thing, and certainly for big Bond fans, I think its inclusion is a very nice touch. There are a couple of really cool driving-related cheats, the first one being an unlimited cloaking feature, which also works on things like the motorbikes and helicopter, which is so awesome. Obviously, enemies can't see you when this is activated, so I had fun going through levels where, you don't typically have the cloak as an option. The other is slow motion driving. Now, I activated this and started playing, and nothing was different, so I started playing around with the controls, and the awesome thing about this particular cheat is that you can switch it on or off by pressing down on the D-pad. I guess this is because it would have been really tedious if you had to play through a whole level in slow motion, but you can select when you want to do it for like key bits, like taking out enemies or going over ramps, which I thought was a really cool implementation. There's all guns, which sounds incredible in theory, and I love this concept art of John Cleese in the armory, but when I activated the cheat, I admit I was slightly underwhelmed. Everything or Nothing has a fine selection of weapons that cover all the bases expected for a game like this, but I kinda like how Bond games to this point usually always tended to have something really out there, like memorable weapons as part of their rosters. You know, like plasma cannons, throwing knives, guided rocket launchers, and Everything or Nothing's selection seems a little tame in comparison, I guess. Though, admittedly, this is a third-person shooter as opposed to a first-person shooter, where there is typically more of an emphasis on the guns themselves, so I can't say that, being underwhelmed with the roster of guns available ever occurred to me at any point throughout the game's story. It was only really when I activated this cheat and I was like, alright, yeah, I guess it's a functional but perhaps slightly bland assortment of guns I've been playing with all this time. But then there is the Platinum Gun, awarded for achieving the maximum number of Platinum medals available, and holy hell is this thing amazing. It's essentially a rocket launcher in a platinum-coated skin of the Golden Gun model, and boy was this thing fun to equip for a playabout. It makes sense that they'd save the most fun and out there cheat for last, and while I never got so far into the game's unlocks when I was a teen, I think I'd have spammed the hell out of this one if I had. It's so much fun. So, wow, those are all of the available awards for completing the single-player mode, and what a package of goodies, some real gems in there, and oh my god, what do you mean there are even more unlockables to go at in Everything or Nothing's very extensive multiplayer mode? Selecting multiplayer from the main menu brings you a selection of modes: cooperative, race, scramble, and arena. We're going to start with cooperative, given that it's the most substantial element of the multiplayer, featuring a whole multi-level side story to the main playthrough of the game, which is kinda insane. The gist of the premise is that you and a friend play as MI6 agents, receiving orders and objectives from M and Q through 13 individual levels split over 3 different chapters, and James Bond himself even pops up in a little cameo appearance, which we will get to in due course. First though, you and your partner need to create dedicated save profiles for this mode, and then it's time to choose your character, and which iconic Bond personalities are on offer here, I wonder? Why, Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng, of course. You must remember Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng. They're classic Bond characters at this point. Who could forget that time Regina and Bond were in the Lotus Esprit together and went diving into the water? And Suggs was of course invaluable to Bond's mission when he went undercover with him as a fellow genealogist to infiltrate Blofeld's Piz Gloria lair. The moment when Feng stood stoically watching knowingly while Elektra toyed with Bond in Zukovsky's casino. There was that time when Lotus spent ages looking around that gallery of concept art from Everything or Nothing. Oh no, wait, that's this game, isn't it? But you know, Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng. Yeah, so this is the weirder thing about this whole co-op mode to me, the fact that these are the 4 characters you have the option to play as. Now, as I say, the co-op story mode does tie into the main single-player story, so it makes sense that you're not necessarily playing as Bond through these levels. And maybe that's for the best because of the inevitable fights that would break out between players squabbling over who gets to be 007 could potentially destroy many a friendship. But I don't know if these were just spare character models that EA had hanging around on their servers and they just threw them in here, like, yeah, sure, I mean, these'll do. But I can't say that any of these characters necessarily scream 007 universe to me. They all kind of look like they escaped different video game series and somehow ended up here. Regina in particular looks like she should be doing battle with the Umbrella Corporation rather than taking orders from Judi Dench. We'll find out that the events of the co-op story take place before and then eventually in parallel with the start of the game's main solo story. So maybe it's even a shame that the likes of 003 and Maya aren't playable characters from the off. Like, it might have been cool to have characters that do appear in the solo story and they're here in this kind of prequel mission, but no, none of these characters are 00s either apparently, and annoyingly we don't get any more info on who these guys are at all. Which I do think is a real shame. Like, if these 4 characters are your leads for a whole other showcase mode of the game, then would a few small bios have been too much to add? Maybe I've just got Stockholm Syndrome now as a result of spending so much time with this game, but like, I want to know what these guys' stories are. Like, how did they end up being MI6 agents? Are they in line for 00 promotion and this is some kind of final test? There's definitely going to be an opening coming up for a 003, we know that much. Some kind of even just like small bit of info would have gone some way in preventing these characters from just feeling like generic video game ciphers, which is ultimately what they end up being, and it's a shame because they are playable characters in a James Bond video game. I feel like that should mean something. Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng, who cares? Pick one, let's go. Tunisia is the location for the first set of levels, subtitled Crossfire, Cornered, Short Fuse, and Last Stand. The game gives you the option to play these as standalone missions or in chapter mode, which is basically just playing each of the missions through in turn. Judi Dench is back as M to give the players their mission briefing.
Agents, we are sending you to an isolated area in Tunisia near the Gulf of Gabes. Your mission is to investigate an individual known only as M.
Known only as M? Is she launching an investigation into herself? Is there something you want to tell us, M? No, rather, it's M. Sappho that we're investigating. I wonder what the M stands for.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
As you'd expect, the first couple of levels of the co-op mode are fairly simple in order to get you into the swing of things. Crossfire sees you making your way through the streets to reach a town square, and once you get there, you go into level 2, Cornered, which is a bit more kind of an endurance kind of a challenge. You and your partner fend off waves and waves of guards in a relatively small location while waiting for M to pull her finger out and locate the secret entrance to M. Sappho's palace. Gameplay-wise, it's mostly exactly the same as the single player. Target to shoot enemies, hand-to-hand combat mechanics are still available, you can pick up the occasional object to use as a weapon and so on. For a bit of competition with your partner, there are some indicators that keep track of how many enemies you've killed, either with guns or hand-to-hand, how many times you've died, and how many lives your team collectively has. So yeah, when your character's health reaches 0, you respawn, usually a bit further back in the level than where you died, but if your partner survives, they can carry on the fight. Obviously, this only functions so long as you have lives remaining between you, because once you lose all of those, you'll need to start the level again from the start. I did think it was pretty cool that as a team, you share the lives. Like, I think this is probably implemented with siblings in mind, like the older sibling is probably going to be a bit better at the game and die a bit less than the less experienced younger sibling. So that way, if one player ends up needing more lives than the other, it kind of balances out. One big difference though, and this is crucial to note, is that there is no Bond sense in the co-op mode, so no slowing down time to target individual enemies, and initially I did find this a bit jarring, especially after just playing the solo mode through in its entirety, and particularly for moments when I was like changing weapons in the middle of a firefight and I was having to do it in real time, and that was a bit annoying. But admittedly, if they had retained that feature for the co-op mode, it would have been more annoying to have firefights constantly pausing while either you or your partner was changing weapons weapons or trying to target something specific. And hey, it's called Bond Sense for a reason, right? And not Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and or Feng Sense. So it's nice that the mechanic is exclusive to our lead hero. The third level of the Tunisia chapter is Short Fuse. You're in M. Sappho's palace now, which is being rigged to blow, as M explains, and that's our M, Judi Dench, that I'm referring to there, of course.
Agents, we've received intel that information is hidden in the palace, and Sappho's henchmen are planting explosives to destroy all evidence of his operations. You must not let that happen.
And the makeup of this level is a bit different to the previous two. There are 6 bombs dotted around the palace. Defusing them requires one player to press and hold the action button for a few seconds while the other player provides cover from attacking guards. Helpfully, objective-related points show up on the radar as these grey dots, which is useful on this level, especially given how vast this palace is. It's easy to get a little bit disoriented in this location, I found, but overall, this was actually my favourite section of the whole Tunisia chapter, and I think that's because the whole bomb defusal element tailors nicely to a 2-person co-op mode. Now, if you were really desperate to play this mode through, but short of bribery, have no willing partner to play it with, I guess you could well make it through most of these earlier levels yourself, assuming that you have a decent level of dexterity in your feet to perform some of the rudimentary simultaneous actions.
Come on, feet, work with me here.
But ultimately, this mode was designed as a 2-person experience, and that's the most rewarding way to play it. And yeah, you know what? I drafted in my partner for the purposes of this record, and we had fun strategizing about how we were going to go about levels, deciding between us who would do the bomb defusal and who would provide cover and things like that. But it can also be slightly frustrating when video game experiences are locked behind a need to find a willing person to do them with. And much to my own bewilderment, most people aren't necessarily that jazzed about spending their spare time playing a co-op mode of a 20-plus-year-old James Bond video game.
Well, everybody needs a hobby.
Bombs defused, it's on to the final portion of the Tunisia chapter, Last Stand, in which M. Sappho actually makes a physical appearance.
This place might go down in flames, but you're going with it.
Girthy, ain't he? I feel like this model belongs in a different universe entirely. His proportions feel a little more cartoony than anyone else in this entire game. Maybe that's why the game never really gives us a good close-up look at the guy. Last Stand is an exhilarating, all-out battle of a level, and you'll eventually happen upon something of an underground factory, which, according to a quick bit of voiceover from Q, is actually nanobot-related.
Interesting. It appears that the machinery is actually nanotechnology.
I'm not gonna lie, I feel like the nanobot thing is a little shoehorned in. Like, just to look at this environment, I'm not sure what about this setup screams nanobot production, but as I say, this is all going to tie into the main story of the game, and I'm kind of glad that they did go to that effort. And I mean, I guess we did kind of need it. I'd be lying if I said that this co-op experience so far was feeling especially Bondian, except for the occasional bit of badgering from M or Q. Like, it could kind of be any generic third-person shooter game on the surface of it, but I definitely don't mean to be too down on this, especially when we have a really cool boss battle with M. Sappho as a climax to this level. You're in this big courtyard and guards are spawning from everywhere, and eventually this central gazebo thing just explodes and M. Sappho appears in this rocket-firing turret and you both need to take him down. There's a rocket launcher up on the balcony and just basically blasting the guy to smithereens whittles down his health nicely, and with him defeated, it's the end of the Tunisia chapter. I'll be honest, I was surprised that M. Sappho is taken out so early. I kind of figured that he'd be like our main villain for the whole of this co-op mode, but no, on to the next chapter based in the Andaman Sea. And a briefing from M introduces a new antagonist.
Our sources indicate that there is a secret research facility on the island. We suspect Dr. Lazarus Beam, an expert in the field of nanolasers, is behind it.
Dr. Lazarus Beam is an expert in the field of lasers? Well, that's nominative determinism at play, isn't it? I don't suppose young Lazarus was ever going to grow up to become a dentist, was he? The Andaman Sea chapter is split across 5 different missions, starting with Cliffhanger, a really cool level where you and your partner are tasked with infiltrating Dr. Beam's island facility. I really love this level. It involves a lot of upward travel, utilizing the rappel from the main story. Stealth is encouraged, and don't be seen is specifically one of the scoring objectives, but at this point in the gameplay, it's perfectly viable to go in guns blazing without things escalating to the point that you and your teammate could be overwhelmed. So there is some nice variety on offer depending on how you personally want to play. Small thing, but I do really love at the start of the level, you're on the beach and there are a bunch of shells and starfish and stuff that you can pick up and use as offensive weapons, which is fun. Hey, maybe Honey Rider should have been one of the playable characters on offer here. Maybe that's why she was so keen to look for shells in Dr. No.
Underneath the mango tree, my honey and me.
Jesus Christ.
Christ.
The next level is Warzone, a smaller environment where your objective is to find the entrance to Dr. Beam's secret mine. Again, scoring objectives emphasize stealth, but I'd say it's not going to be too difficult to handle the guards if you did want to go in all guns blazing, though it will trigger many more enemies than what you would have to deal with by taking a purely stealthy approach. And you know what, I don't mean to imply that it's complete doddle playing through these levels when you choose a more combat-heavy approach. There's still a lot of challenge involved. And indeed, to say that you don't have the option to select an operative, agent, or 00 difficulty setting in co-op mode, I personally found the difficulty quite finely balanced across the whole of the mode. It's in that nice place of being challenging but also rewarding. I will say though that there is a distinct lack of body armor throughout the levels. Warzone ends when you both get to the mine entrance, which leads into the next level firefight, which is appropriately titled as this level does away with any need for stealth tactics. This environment's quite large and sprawling. It's spread out around a big warehouse as you search for the entrance to Dr. Beam's secret laser facility, as M explains.
Our intelligence indicates that the laser facility is hidden inside those dilapidated mining structures. We are not sure of the exact location. You must reconnoiter the buildings and search for a way into the main facility.
M making good use of her word of the day calendar again. There's more fun co-op stuff here involving the need to restore the power to 2 elevators, and then one of you has to find the elevator controls and hold down the button while the other one rides the thing up to the desired floor. These bits are obviously here to justify the need for 2 players to be working in tandem, of course, and unlike the previous chapter, these are the levels where I think it gets harder and harder if you were to try and achieve these objectives solo. Like, one of you needs to be holding down a button while the other is providing covering fire as guards are triggered, and there's only so much a person's toes can achieve when it comes to playing 2 characters yourself.
Damn it!
The level ends when you successfully infiltrate the laser facility, leading to the cheerily titled next mission, Death Trap.
Agents, you've found the research facility. Unfortunately, your presence has been discovered, so you may abandon stealth. You must destroy any laser technology you find. It must not fall into the wrong hands.
I feel like it kinda is already in the wrong hands. Is that not why we're all here? This is another really fun level. It's very much action-packed, running around this facility, taking down guards, and there's this really nice bit where, again, something to justify the need for 2 players, there's this conveyor belt, which one player must ride along while the other presses a button to change the laser sequence so they don't harm the other player. If you're looking for a way to test your relationship, I can heartily recommend this level, as it was certainly a test for mine. The main objective of the mission is to disable these nano laser generators, and again, nice co-op mechanics stuff. One player must extend the bridge so the other can disable the lasers, and you need to take out waves of guards in between. The level ends with a 5-minute timer before the area melts down, so you need to fight your way back through the level to escape. And then the final segment of this chapter is Core Descent, where players must flee the facility and get to the extraction point. This is an all-out firepower kind of a level. There's an awful lot of guards to contend with, and it also makes really great use of the rappel feature. There are multiple points in the level where you need to go either up or down this giant silo, and it's often preferable to have one player go ahead while the other covers them. I love some of the visuals that the rappel points give you. This bit looking up at the top of the silo through the giant fans, it has a really great sense of scale to it, and what would a Bond game be without a level set in a missile silo? It's just a part of the formula at this point. Fighting your way to this opening onto the beach gets you to the extraction point, and the chapter is complete. Can't help but feel like if the agents had just tunneled their way into the facility through this point, it might have been way quicker than all of the faffing going on through the mine and whatever, but okay. Overall, big fan of this particular chapter. I love how things escalate throughout the levels. There are a variety of ways to play through, certainly in the earlier levels at least, and there's some great teamworking moments, and I love that it's making a lot of use of the rappel mechanic. What I don't love is that there's no showdown with Dr. Lazarus Beam. The guy just completely drops out of the story. We never see him, and it's not as if he appears in the main body of the story either, so it's weird to name drop a specific bad guy and then just not show him at all. Would it have been that hard to include a little boss battle? You know, he could be piloting a giant laser firing mechanical spider. Oh no, sorry, yeah, no, we need to save that for Red Grant in the From Russia with Love video game, of course. This might be the only time in history that anyone has ever complained about there being a lack of a Dr. Lazarus Beam in anything. But yeah, I was kind of thinking that after the whole Sappho thing, each of these chapters was maybe gonna end with a showdown down with the villain of that particular series of levels? Or at least confirm his fate? Like, did he die on his way back to his home planet? What? Anyway, on to the final chapter of the co-op story mode set in Egypt, where of course some of the early levels of the solo campaign were set, and this will be very relevant later on, but let's start things off by talking about the first two levels of this chapter, Flashpoint and Sabotage. These levels are very similar, both require players to sneak around the nanotech center, dispatching guards and using the Q-Spider to destroy nano machines. M calls out in her briefing that if guards are alerted, then these missions will become extremely difficult, and while similar to earlier on in the sense that it is ultimately up to the players whether you want to go in the guns blazing route or take the sneakier options available, especially given how much the Prima guide emphasized how difficult these levels become without going stealthy, me and my partner figured we'd better be playing the levels through the way that everyone seems to want us to. Fun fact, if you opt to not play with stealth, Judi Dench will literally crawl out of your TV and strangle you to death. To be honest though, it was a nice excuse for us to vary up our play tactics, and dare I say we had an awful lot of fun hiding around corners and learning the guards' pacing routes, looking for the opportune moments to silently take them down. It ended up being a lot more enjoyable than I kinda thought it would be. All the business with taking down the nanomachines is a lot of fun too. In Flashpoint, one player goes into the room where the machine is and the other stays in a different room, activating the platform so that you can send a Q-Spider into the machine and destroy the spark of the Matrix, I guess, that's the key to the whole machine. Were they developing an Optimus Prime here, or what? It couldn't be any less science fact than the game currently is if they were. In the next level, Sabotage, this action is slightly tweaked, where one player must rather send a Q-Spider into the machine room through a series of vents while the other activates the platforms that the spider can go across. Again, I think the co-op actually utilizes the solo campaign mechanics really well. It's cool to still be able to use a lot of the MI6 gadgets that Bond gets to use, and putting them in a co-op scenario gives them a bit of a different spin. It feels fresh. And remember what I said about the location matching with where Bond is sent earlier in the game's story? Well, that becomes quite blatantly apparent when 007 himself makes a little cameo appearance towards the end of the Flashpoint level.
Good day.
We'll have another cameo to talk about coming up soon, but I do think it's really awesome that they designed it this way. The idea that this is happening in sync with stuff that Bond is doing in this same facility. It's really cool, and if anything, it just makes me wish there were more instances like this. Like, you know, earlier on, we could have maybe seen 003 on a particular mission, or it doesn't necessarily need to be Bond in every instance, but just something to tie it into the main story. And if you needed any more confirmation that these missions were indeed happening in parallel, then Knife's Edge makes that even more overt by taking place in a section of the level you play through as Bond in a long way down. This is a very short level, obviously taking place before the whole facility starts to explode, and this is a bit of an action reward almost for how stealthy the previous levels were. You're basically being held in this small location while M figures out what you should be doing next, and there are plenty of guards to do battle with until a door opens for you both to escape through. As I say, this level is very short, like under 3 minutes in length, even at a leisurely pace, but I just got a real kick out of the crossover of all this, and just how the co-op mode operates as a kind of prelude to the game's main story is just so cool. And so it's on to the final level of the entire mode, Inferno. The level opens with the characters in a lift, and it quickly becomes clear that some explosives might have gone off during this journey.
The building has become compromised. Find a way out immediately.
Yeah, no shit, but isn't it compromised because of you? Like, I don't know, couldn't you have asked Bond to set the timers for just slightly longer so that we didn't have to play out the rest of this mission with the building turning to ash around us? But whatever, it makes for such a cool level. This is so awesome. It's obviously an all-out action experience, and enemies are incredibly tough. There are some nano-suit-wearing guards in places, as if the difficulty needed ratcheting up any further. But yeah, the building is in absolute ruins, and you're rappelling up and down lift shafts and shooting your way through floors upon floors of goons. There is a slightly tragic sight on one floor, where, locked in one of the offices, you come across two guards, one of them giving chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth to the other. Like, okay, I wasn't feeling bad about dispatching of all these nameless goons, but now I'm seeing this and I'm kind of asking myself questions that previously had never occurred to me.
People never think how things affect the family of a henchman.
And as if flames weren't enough, there are also these electricity barriers in places where one of you needs to hold down a switch so that the other can make it across, always keeping that co-op mechanic necessity present, which is quite lovely. James Bond also makes his second cameo appearance towards the end of the level.
I'll take it from here.
Love the appearance, but it does beg the question of the exact moment in time that this is set, because the building is already in a state of destruction and Bond is heading up, and it is indeed at the top of the building where we see him at the start of the level in the solo campaign, which I thought was the first of the explosives, but I guess this means the building was already blowing up prior to that cutscene when he set the explosives off on the top floor. I would have thought it would be more prudent to set off all of the explosives at once, or at least start by setting off the explosives at the top of the building and working down rather than this way, but far be it for me to tell MI6 how to do their job. The level climaxes with a big final shootout in this big hangar-type room. You and your partner reach a final door to open, and that's it. Mission accomplished. Bit of a shame that there's no final cutscene or debrief with M, like it might have been nice to end on a note of something like, "Well done, agents, you are now accepted into the Double O's," or something like that, just to give the whole story a bit of a capper. Overall, I didn't think I'd be coming away from the co-op mode as impressed as I am. The levels have a great amount of gameplay variety to them, and as I mentioned earlier, it's fun to take some of the mechanics from the solo story like the rappel and Q-Spider and utilize them in co-op specific scenarios. I think the narrative itself could have done with a bit more polishing. Having a main villain specifically for the mode would have been nice, and I'll never not find it weird that Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng are our main playable characters. But overall, a very worthwhile inclusion to Everything or Nothing's overall package. You cannot say this game does not give you bang for your buck. If it has a major downside to it, it's that there's very little here to help identify this as a Bond-specific game mode. If it weren't for the Judi Dench and John Cleese voiceovers and the Bond cameos in a couple of places, this could be any old third-person shooter, and you'd think that for Bond, they'd have gone the extra mile to give it more of a 007 sheen. Like, yeah, make the playable characters all be 00 agents or rookies out to achieve their 00 statuses. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when the developers were making this mode and coming down on Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng as the lead characters for this thing, because it seems like such a random assortment. Like, what was the logic behind it? For years now, fans have speculated on the nature of James Bond spin-off movies and TV shows, and damn it if there were one spin-off concept that I would full-throatedly endorse right from the very first announcement, it would be the Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and or Feng story. So, moving on, there's a whole load of unlockables as part of the co-op mode to keep you coming back, including alternative characters to play as, and even a whole other multiplayer mode in the shape of Arena, which we will be talking about in detail very soon. Unlocks are based on points accrued from achieving scoring objectives. There are 2 to 5 of these per level and are based on things like not losing any lives, not being noticed by guards, having a team accuracy score above a certain percentage, and dispatching all enemies in the level. Each achieved objective earns you 10 points, and you are informed if you've reached the threshold for a certain unlock when you complete a level, so it's not a case of accruing points and then choosing which unlocks to spend them on, which might have been the better way to go with this, but everything unlocks as part of the same order. There are 3 arena levels to unlock and 15 characters. These are a mix of random goons you don't care about, characters from the single player you may semi-care about, and 2 legacy characters which you should absolutely care about, Baron Samedi and Oddjob. And mercifully, these are 2 of the early unlocks. These look like the same character models from Nightfire, which I kinda love, but it's a shame that they don't include more classic characters. I mean, yeah, sure, Egypt Commander and Hazmat Guard are worthwhile inclusions to somebody out there, maybe. Most character unlocks are villainous characters that you can then select for the arena mode, but a handful are actually bonus characters for the co-op mode, starting with the scantily dressed Maya. I initially figured that this was their way around the age-old Bond video game restriction on good guy characters fighting other good guy characters in multiplayer, so if you remember in the likes of the world is not enough Agent Under Fire and Nightfire, goodies cannot fight each other in deathmatch scenarios, which is a bit of a daft restriction, I think, and ultimately renders a good chunk of the character base unselectable, because God forbid Dr. Christmas Jones be seen taking shots at Sir Robert King, and so I figured that same rule would be applied here. Until we eventually unlocked 003, and I figured he'd be part of the co-op selection, but no, he's for the arena mode, which is the deathmatch mode, of course, and Suggs, Lotus, Regina, and Feng are selectable too, so Everything or Nothing is low-key that rare Bond game where good guy characters can brutally murder each other in multiplayer. Anyway, in terms of other multiplayer modes to talk about, we have Race, which is sadly nothing to do with competing against a fellow player to see who can drive drive a lap around the environments the fastest. Seriously, the driving levels in the main game are so cool. It's a shame that there's no kind of multiplayer race here, even if it wasn't necessarily with gadget-laden cars, and it was just kind of like 2 players controlling 2 individual cars during the rally race, for example. But rather involves playing through the co-op mode levels again, except this time there's a timer mechanic. It starts ticking up from when you start a level, and then time is deducted based on kills, time is added for player deaths. And there's no objective as such. I guess you're just supposed to try and get the best final score possible. Scramble is another multiplayer mode in a similar vein. You're playing through the co-op mode levels once again, but this time you can customize the scoring system as well as other features like time limit and player targeting. The purpose being to just compete against your partner to see who comes out with the best score.
Let's see who ends up on top.
I cannot say that either of these modes is something that I'm particularly keen on revisiting anytime soon. I guess if you and someone you know loves Everything or Nothing's co-op mode so much that you find the ability to tinker with the scoring mechanics exciting, then this is a good way to more thoroughly compete with the person you're playing with. But it is the same levels over again, and honestly I think it's a bit misleading for both of these modes to appear in the main menu as if they are separate features when they're basically just the same things again but with different scoring settings. By all means include them, but I think to have them nestled in between cooperative and arena modes on the main menu is a bit misleading. Or is at least an attempt to make this all seem like it's more unique content than it actually is. So we come to arena mode, and boy do I have a lot of things to say about this. None of them good. While technically accessible from the very beginning, you do actually need to unlock the first available map, which is Syston. It only takes about 30 points to do so, so chances are you'll be unlocking this early enough into your cooperative campaign. 2 more maps are unlockable in Test Lab at 160 points and Burn Chamber at 370 points, and boy did we have to work for that one. By the time Everything or Nothing was released in early 2004, a multiplayer mode was synonymous with James Bond video games. GoldenEye was already a legend by that point, and The World Is Not Enough for the N64, Agent Under Fire, Nightfire had all come with deathmatch modes for up to 4 players. Now, on a personal note, Nightfire, especially by 2004, had become a staple of gatherings with me and my friends. We played the hell out of that thing. I know my way around the Skyrail map better than I know the neighborhood I grew up in. We were playing that thing all the time, and the fact a new Bond game with a new multiplayer mode was coming out was so exciting to us. My expectations in particular were incredibly high for it. I specifically remember me and my friend Chris playing through the cooperative mode for the express purpose of unlocking the arena maps. We didn't actually really get that much into the co-op mode itself. The lack of a 007 sheen to the whole thing was a little off-putting for us at that time, but damn it, we were going to get that new multiplayer experience. So we unlocked Syston, settled ourselves in for what was surely to be the virgin voyage of many a multiplayer deathmatch experience. We did not even reach the designated time limit that we'd given ourselves before we decided to call it a day and revert back to Nightfire. If there is a single, I would say devastating failure to the Everything or Nothing package, then it is the arena mode, to the point that I think I'd have just preferred if this was left off the game completely. Format-wise, it's exactly what you'd expect. Players are dropped into environments, there are weapons dotted around, you grab them, you kill your opponents, whoever gets the most kills wins, typical deathmatch rules. I think ultimately the problem comes down to the fact that the small selection of maps available are all incredibly, well, small, and everything is happening in the same frame with the camera zooming in and out depending on how close or far apart players are from each other. It means that there's pretty much no scope to strategize, like stock up on weapons before charging towards your opponent, or find a place to hole up and let your enemies come for you. Every match ends up just being a bit of a scramble, and it lacks any real kind of customization, which I think could potentially have had players coming back to this thing. You can spend hours with the different game modes and customization options that are available on the likes of GoldenEye, Agent Under Fire, Nightfire, so I think it was just especially devastating to me at that time. The fact that Everything or Nothing dropped the ball so bad that the ball has burst through the floorboards and landed on the head of Grandma sat in the room below and given her a concussion. The additional insult to injury is that you have to unlock this mode as if it's some kind of a reward. I don't know why they didn't just make the maps available from the start instead of having them as unlockables, but if you do want to make them that, then why make them so damn difficult to get to? I mean, seriously, Burn Chamber had me grinding for the points needed to unlock it. This is actually the first time that I'm playing a couple of these maps through too, given how I was never going to put in the time into unlocking the other maps after the ill-fated maiden voyage with Syston back in 2004. They also continue my broader issue with the multiplayer elements of the game in that aside from a handful of the playable characters, there's really very little here, especially in terms of the environments, to identify this as existing within a James Bond universe. I mean, we have Cistern, which is some kind of sewer with neon green material glowing beneath the floor like it's the power plant from The Simpsons. Then there's Test Lab, a fairly generic research center looking place with lifts up to higher platforms and a gas chamber at the center of it. And then there's Burn Chamber, a level that we fought our way through the scoring system to unlock because I'd heard that this level features Jaws and I wanted to experience that. And contrary to what the instruction booklet implies about Jaws appearing in the multiplayer overall, it is indeed just this level that includes the guy. So be sure not to make the mistake I did when I was a teen and wait around in the Cistern level for ages expecting him to pop up.
Now, the instruction booklet said that Jaws could be absolutely anywhere, so keep your eye out for him. Could be absolutely anywhere. Is he behind one of those pipes, do you think? Jaws could be absolutely anywhere. How on earth are we to...
It's nice to see the character in his classic costume, but he doesn't really do much beyond stomp around the environment, and if you get near to him, he'll catch you and try biting you or tossing you. I guess it gives that level a certain novelty factor at best. If the mode has a single saving grace, then it's the fact that some of the environment traps are pretty cool in concept. On each of the 3 maps, there are these big glowing buttons, and pressing them activates traps in other areas of the map, often explosions, but also including lasers and the gas chamber in Test Lab. It's a nice idea, but a bit tough to utilize effectively when you can't exactly lose sight of your enemies in this space, can you? Maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but the arena mode is really what drags Everything or Nothing back from being the pinnacle of Bond gaming for me. I'd still probably champion Nightfire above all else as being like the perfect Bond game package because it has an incredible multiplayer that me and my friends still play to this day. Everything or Nothing's arena mode in comparison is something that is just so lackluster that I'd kind of prefer if it wasn't even here. I mean, maybe this is just my experience. Let me know below if you have any fond memories of playing this and I just missed out on that formative experience with it. I don't feel right ending my coverage of this multiplayer mode on a downer though, so once again I'll just reiterate, the co-op mode itself is pretty great. So that's my take on every game mode available in this thing, and you may well be wondering at this point, what could possibly be left for me to say about Everything or Nothing as I look to wrap this up? What more could an individual human being have to say about this game? Well, funny I should ask. Even without taking into account a lot of the technical limitations of the day, Everything or Nothing is a damn near perfect cinematic James Bond gaming experience. The original story, the original cast, the Bond formula elements, the references back to the cinematic legacy of the character, the legitimacy of having Pierce Brosnan himself here in both likeness and voice. What more could a Bond fan have possibly wanted back in 2004? Ultimately, I never put in the same hours with Everything or Nothing as I did other Bond games of the time, mainly because of the multiplayer. It just never quite held the same special place in my heart as Nightfire did, which, despite not having quite the same cinematic polish as Everything or Nothing, does remain my personal favorite James Bond game. But that doesn't stop me from being able to admit that Everything or Nothing is something of a special example in the 007 gaming canon. And you can tell that so much thought, care, and attention went into making this a pretty stunning presentation that holds up well even today. And while individual levels can feel small, they're more specific, detailed, and well optimized. Everything matters, everything counts. It feels incredibly well considered and crafted, from level design to objectives to gadgets to character models, even to fond references and callbacks to the film series. I feel ashamed at not having even touched on the music score until this point, but as well as my love for the Maya title song and its variants, Sean Callery is here providing the music score for the game, and I think he does a phenomenal job with this. Even at the time of release, I knew him from one of my favorite TV shows ever, 24, and he does a really great job here of sticking to the house style of Bond soundtracks at that time, while also providing something entirely original and brilliant. There's a reason Everything or Nothing has taken on something of a status above just being another James Bond video game. It's a highly polished cinematic gaming experience, and in retrospect, it's a final love letter to the Brosnan era of James Bond, and for fans like myself who hold his era of films in great reverence especially, it's a really wonderful send-off to the man as the character. I entirely consider this to be his 5th canon James Bond adventure. I love to think that after the events of Die Another Day, this is where he ventured next. As I mentioned earlier on, the bookends of him starting as Bond on a mission in Russia and finishing as James Bond on a mission in Russia are just too perfect. I adore Everything or Nothing, and I consider us Bond fans very lucky to have it.
Brilliant.
If you've made it to the end of this video, then congratulations. You have earned a Bond moment, you have earned a gold medal, a platinum medal. The only downside to that is that your reward for doing so is me in skimpier garments. Let me know your own thoughts and memories of Everything or Nothing in the comment section below. As I say, while some elements of the multiplayer may drag this thing down from just being at the very pinnacle of Bond gaming, for me, damn is it close, and I would love to know how this game sits for you. And also below, if you haven't already done so, please do consider clicking the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button. Also below, you can find a link to my Patreon page if you want to go one extra step in supporting the channel, link below. And with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.
Let's see about that southern hospitality.